One day they made this hologram in the room of a square and a circle that looked like that. It was the first time that I have any conscious recollection of being able to, I've ever seen that, or that square and the circle before in that particular relationship. And so they had me look at it, and I looked at it, and then they said, do you see it? And I said, yes. And they said, okay, your job now is to find that relationship in Metatron's cube. And then they left. And I actually thought at the moment when they left, because they always give me those little things, and usually I figure them out pretty quick and then go on to the next one. And when they gave me that, I figured, well, okay, I'll do it in a few hours here, or maybe I'll get it by tomorrow. And I started working on it, and I couldn't find it, and I just kept going. Days went by, and weeks went by, and months started going by, and I was sitting there and I was getting really frustrated. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out where that relationship was inside of those circles. I tried every conceivable thing that I could think of. Of course, I didn't have 12 lines in there, which might have made a difference, but it still didn't. It wasn't where it was at anyway, so it wouldn't have made any difference even if I did have the proper Metatron's cube. And one day the angels interceded directly, which they don't usually do in my life, but they have a few times. And this was one of them. I was sitting with this stuff late at night with patterns all over the floor, and nobody knew what I was doing, by the way. This is very secret in my life. I didn't discuss this with anyone, maybe once in a while, but it was really rare. No one really knew. This is sort of a thing that I was doing, and it just was, I was driven to do it. Nobody even cared anyway, so it didn't really make any difference. Nobody cared about this stuff. And so one day I've got it all over the floor, and I'm trying to find the circle and the square in this thing, and I get a knock on the door. So I open the door up, and here's somebody standing there I've never seen before in my whole life. This tall, kind of this guy. And he says, sorry, he said he was sorry to bother me and everything else like that, but that he had been sent there from his group to talk to me and to tell me about the circle and the square. And I just kind of looked at him, and he told me, I don't think he even told me his name. I just sort of grabbed him and pulled him in the room. Sit down. If you know anything about a circle and a square, I don't want to listen about this stuff. And he said he was sent there right from the Masons, that they had told him that he had to come to, they had given him my address and everything, and told him to come to me. And so this drawing here was his. I didn't draw this. The very first thing he did is he made a square on the page. And the second thing he did is he made the circle. Before he ever even started, and I went, oh, there it is. That's it. That's the one. And then he started making all these fancy lines all over the place. He divided it into like this, and then he drew a diamond around here, like that. And then he drew from that point up to the circle and back and down to the circle and back, like that. And then he did something that I didn't quite understand at the time. He drew this line that was here, he drew a parallel line up to there. And this line here, he drew a parallel line down, and he reflected this to this one in the same way, forming this pattern like that. By the rules that I had understood, that's cheating. That doesn't, you can't play that game because these points don't go anywhere. Everything has to go to defined places that you can geometrically mark, and you don't have to measure or anything else like that. And these don't go anywhere, you know. So anyway, that was I had a real problem with that when he started talking about it. And so he said the secret to this whole thing is that the perimeter of the square has to equal the circumference of the circle. For those of you who have read Taoism and a lot of the Lao Tzu and stuff, the whole thing about circling the square and squaring the circle, you probably heard this before in poems and everything else. it's all trying to get the geometry so that the two equal each other. And life is constantly trying to deal with this relationship in so many ways, on biological levels and everything else. At least in retrospect, I know that. I didn't know that then. And then he began to tell me that this created something called the phi ratio, which I wrote up in here before, of this ratio of phi, which equals phi, and this ratio is 1.618, is what it's usually approximated at, because what comes after that is 0.339, but this amount here, since this is 0 plus a tiny bit, is so small that they just eliminate that. And they approximate it at 1.618. I didn't know what this meant. I didn't have any idea what that was at that time. But he talked about it, and how that it was a proportion in life and how important it was. He spent about 2 hours telling me how important it was. And he said that all the lines in here were all broken up into the phi ratio. Now what the phi ratio is if you were to take this little rod that I have in my hand here, there's an infinite number of places you could cut it in, but there's only 2 that you could cut it or bend it in. That would be the phi ratio, and one would be here, and one would be approximately here. Those would be the 2 places, real close. The human can zero right into that. Humans can, for example, pick the center of a circle better than most mechanical things can, just by going like that, because we can intuit it. If this was the rod, again, we could either pick here or there, approximately where the phi ratio is. Now, depending on which direction you're coming from. Now, this is what I mean by that. If you're coming from, say, this direction, and this is the phi ratio here, this will create a mathematical proportion such that if this segment is A, and this segment is B, and the whole thing is C, then it's a ratio such that A divided by B is proportionate to B divided by C. It's just a simple relationship. And it creates this mathematical formula. No matter how big or long, you can get something 12 miles long, you're going to cut it at a certain place, and the miles and everything will divide. It doesn't matter if it's inches or centimeters or whatever it is. It doesn't make any difference what your yardstick is. It's always going to be the same. Okay. Well, if you had never heard about the phi ratio, you would not have any idea how much you are immersed in the phi ratio. There's so many places in the body that it would not be possible for someone to count them all in their lifetime. If they were counting every single day of their lives for the rest of their lives, you couldn't do it. Wouldn't be possible, because there's at least 100 trillion cells, and it's all through those. So, not counting all the places throughout the rest of the body and everything else, it's just phenomenal where God has used this same particular ratio. He then brought in Leonardo's drawing with a square in the circle around it, which I had not really thought much about before. And he talked about that somewhat. And then he drew this compass in this square and this eye of somebody. It doesn't look like the right eye of horse. The right eye of horse has these 3 lines that go. It's Egyptian. It's very different. That looks like a real person's eye kind of there. And then he left. I never saw him ever since the rest of my life. But my life's not over with, so who knows? He may show up. After he left, he didn't tell me the answer, but after he left, I got it. And I realized that Metatron's cube is really a three-dimensional object. Being three-dimensional, you could rotate it and look at Metatron's cube from a different view. And so when you do that, if you rotate Metatron's cube to this view, it becomes square rather than hexagonal. Once it's in there like that, just taking the center part of Metatron's cube out, which is really the egg of life, just this 4 little cells up like that. Well, first of all, it's in a cube, so you could put a perfect cube that would fit around here. And it has the zona pellucida around it, which is a sphere. And so the very nature of this 8-cell division is that there is a sphere around it and a cube around it. And the cube is such that it points precisely to where the 16-cell division goes. And that looked like what they were showing me. But according to this guy from Masons, the key is that the perimeter had to equal the circumference. And so I spent several more years trying to calculate and finally came up with, son of a gun, it doesn't. It doesn't work. But then I remembered that that's the inner surface of the zona pellucida. There's 2 circles that go around the flower of life. And if you go to the outer surface of the zona pellucida, bingo, it hits a near perfect phi ratio, right on. It's contained, this relationship of the square, circling the square and squaring the circle is contained in the original 8 cells of life. And from there, many, many, many things began to unfold very rapidly for me from there. From now on, whenever you see a square with 4 circles in it like that, we are always talking about the egg of life, okay? Cell division. So here's these 4 circles. I then tried to draw in these other patterns just to see kind of what it would look like over that, superimpose it to see if I can find anything. And again, this doesn't seem to appear to go difference. And that's a very, very small amount between the arm length and the height. And that 1/10,000th of an inch is not a mistake. It is part of the Fibonacci sequence. And so we have this squareness or cubeness around us. And look where the center of that square field is. Exactly here at the base of the spine. Which happens to be where this other little square sits. Of these 8 cells. Centered in the center of this cube is a tiny cube with this big cube out around the outside of us. This is what I mean by we grow radially out from those original 8 cells. The lines from the original 8 cells, from my way of seeing, 55 feet right from the moment of conception, right moment that it gets to this level here, you've got a field, even on a baby, that's going to be 27.5 feet out there approximately all the way around it. The lines and everything are extended out there. The whole thing's there. And then we start growing just like a crystal along the lines. If you put your legs out like this and your arms out like that, there will be a perfect sphere that will fit around the body, or a circle, either one. But its center will be at the navel, not at the base of the spine. The center of this one is right here. You can see if you look at the circle, how I'm aiming into the center of that circle. Though the science behind navels is pretty interesting. I'll leave that for just a little bit more to discuss that, but it's not as straightforward as it looks. So, and when that happens, the square and the circle, hit exactly on the floor. If you were to take the circle, center of the circle, and move it down to the center of the square, this would move exactly halfway, and the whole thing would have that image that you saw in the first place. The square, the perimeter of the square that fits around the human body, and the circumference of the circle that fits around the human body, of this particular body, is almost identical. And I can prove that mathematically in a little bit. It's almost exactly the same. Almost is part of the game here. We got to wait a little. You'll see what this almost is all about. There's no mistakes in the geometry of life at all. None. Everything is flawless. It's all runs right down there. And soon we're going to see that all these lines that Leonardo drew on the body, you see the line at the wrists and here and across the neck and here and across the knees and everything. And the face is broken up in all these lines. These all have deep meaning. And this man obviously knew about what I'm about to discuss. And I'll be able to pretty clearly show to you that that's true. And only we're just beginning to get into what this is all about. But Leonardo was right on top of all of this a long time ago. This thing about phi ratio again, which we still don't really know what it's all about yet. According to Thoth, as above, so below. He was the one that said that, by the way. The human body is the measuring stick of the universe and the fields of the body. It measures the macrocosm as well as the microcosm. Anything you need to know on any level of existence whatsoever is contained in the human field. It's the open book of all that is. And so anything you want to know should be there, and one of the main things is this phi ratio thing should be in the very proportions of the human body. And where that is located in is if you've got a square around here with a line down the middle, right? And if you drew the line that divided the body in half down the middle, and then you drew a diagonal from there to there, that line that comes down as a diagonal and then goes over there, the bend in it is mathematically exactly the phi ratio. It could not be any more perfect. It's not even possible. Here is the square around the body and the line down the middle, and this is that diagonal that would go up to this imaginary corner up there. If you just use one edge as 1, that's your measuring stick, then this divides this into 1/2 and 1/2. So you got that right away. And what you're looking for is C. And this will be B, and this one over here will be A. And since, remember that ratio that I showed over there, A divided by B, it's going to be equal to B divided by A plus B, or B divided by C. Now C is simply, what I've done here is I've taken a line like that, a compass, and ruled this out like that. So this B is the same as this B, and so you've got a line of A and B, and the whole line is C. And so you've got A divided by B is proportionate to B divided by A plus B, or proportionate to B plus divided by C. We also know, because of Pythagoras lived, he said that B squared equals this side squared plus this side squared, and this side is A, so you have B squared equals A squared plus 1 squared. A squared we know is 1/2, and 1 squared is 1, and 1/2 squared is 1/4, so B squared equals 5/4, or B equals the square root of 5 divided by 2. So this equals the square root of 5 divided by 2. And we know another simple equation is that C equals A plus B. And C is what we're looking for here, and if you take A, which is 1/2, and B, which is the square root of 5 divided by 2, so C equals 1/2 plus the square root of 5 divided by 2. Just try it. Take that formula. Take that formula and put it into your computer. Just take 0.5 plus square root of 5 divided by 2. It's a simple equation. Put it into any little computer and watch what happens. It'll go 1.618 and it'll go until it runs out of computer chips. It will never go to, if you got a lot of computer chips in there, you better wait a while, because that thing's going to really be going like this, trying to find an in, and it won't ever find an in. It hit it right on the nail. Exactly. Right on the nail. That is how you get to that, and it's in the human proportions. So here's the human body with this line down the middle and this diagonal coming up here. Well, if you were to draw a line from the navel straight across here over to this point, parallel again, from here to here, another one of those no-nos. This is not my drawing originally. This is someone else's. The first thing is that these two lines cross exactly at the phi ratio. This line is broken into the phi ratio. This line is broken into the phi ratio, creating we haven't talked about it yet, but this is a golden triangle, and this is a golden triangle, and this big one is a golden triangle, creating the same pattern. And this line from the top of the head to the navel, from the navel to the bottom of the feet, is also broken in the phi ratio, which means the top of the body relative to the bottom of the body from the navel is in the phi ratio. Though it's a little more complex than that, and people have studied this in great detail, when a baby is born, the navel is in the dead center, shouldn't use that word, is in the precise center of the baby. So it's right in the center of the baby. But as the baby starts growing, if it's it starts heading toward phi ratio, and it goes above it, and then below it, and above it, and below it, and above it, and below it, and starts zeroing in, getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to phi ratio as the child gets older and older and older and approaches adult. And a female, I believe, ends up with the navel is above the phi ratio, and the male ends up with it slightly below. You got to average the two, and you get the phi ratio. This is what the computers have found. So it's even more amazing than just saying it's the phi ratio. And but it's not just the top half of the body and the phi ratio is the bottom half of the body, as you're about to see. It's really a much more complex situation. Taking the finger, for example, every bend in your body is in the phi ratio. If you take this bone compared to this bone, that's in the phi ratio. This bone is in the phi ratio to this one, and this one's in the phi ratio to this one. And all the bones running through your hands and your feet are all bent exactly at the phi ratio. The length of your hand compared to this bone, that bends at the phi ratio. And this bone relative to this bone bends at the phi ratio. The length of your foot to this one, and the length of this bone to this one, etc., all the way up through. In fact, it's all your bones are all in the phi ratio, running through your whole body. And even things that you wouldn't normally think about. You probably never saw this before, though you may have wondered about it. And we haven't talked about the golden mean spiral, though we will in a minute. I always forget to use this one. When you take your hand like this, and you go like this, and watch. Can you see that ratio? They move in the golden mean spiral as they move. It's actually a Fibonacci spiral. You can see the spiraling like an nautilus shell that happens in there. If you even do things like do something real unusual like this, where you connect the centers of each one of your fingertips in this zigzag pattern, each one of these bends are in a phi ratio as they go down there like that. So it's emerged throughout your whole body, but in all kinds of ways. The sizes of organs relative to the size of other organs, and the sizes in the cells, the sizes of nuclei to other things. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's somewhat redundant. Now, the ancients were well aware of this. The Greeks, Egyptians, Chinese, all of them from a long time ago, they understood this relationship in life. And so this, by the way, is another way to show a phi ratio. In other words, instead of showing a straight line with a dot on it, if you were going to show a bunch of phi ratios, all you'd have is a bunch of dots on a line. So another way to do it is have a curve like this, showing where it crosses at the phi ratio. And this way you can see all the curves at one time and see where one came from to the next one. This came out of The Power of Limits by, I can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry, Dorksy Jokes. Does anybody know how to pronounce his name? It's a book called The Power of Limits, and it's a very, very, very good book on sacred geometry. And here you can see how they have the navel here, And they even showed it slightly above, which is accurate on this. And exactly where the nipples are forms another phi ratio in here. It forms a phi ratio with the knees. All your various points in your body. And this is just a few. You can just keep going on and on and on and on and on. And the Greeks, when they understood this, they created architecture and all of their arts using both sides of their brain simultaneously. They used the left side, their logical male side, that when they were making this sculpture, they carefully measured all the lengths of everything. There was no intuitiveness, none, absolutely zero. Everything was used carefully measured. But at the same time, they used their creative side, their feminine creative side, to decide exactly how he's going to be standing and where he's looking and what he's going to feel like and what kind of smile he's got and all these other kinds of things on his face. But this proportions of life, called the phi ratio, is not just in the human structure. It's in all life. Everything, bugs and plants and trees and the relationship of planets and orbits and everything else. It's in all of it. It ties down into electrons and everything else. But even in here, you can see the relationships. This is not a real good one, but the length of the body compared to the size of the wings and everything else. And if you were really going to get into it, where the dots are located and everything else, is all phi ratio stuff. This one is a dragonfly, and the length of each tail segment coming in here is all in these cascading phi ratios over here. And then they didn't get into it, but the bend in every one of the legs and arms and the size of the head this way relative to it this way. Even the overall structure, like we have a square that fits around us, and this is a rectangle that fits around that. All of your external fields that fit around all of the geometrical forms are all going to be functions of this. Now ours is directly, it's a square, but there's the square, there's the diamond field this way, which is a rectangle, the diamond field this way, which is a rectangle, there's a hexagonal field that goes this way, and there's another one that fits up over this way. And the outer fields are all going to be directly associated with those or functions of them, meaning additions, multiplications, divisions of those shapes. And this is a frog skeleton, and you can see here where they've shown that all the divisions inside the frog bone are all broken down in these very strict mathematics. It's not just at random. There's no randomness. And this one is fish, which I chose this one because there's so many different kinds of fish that it's hard to imagine that they could all be purely mathematical. They really do seem to be non-mathematical, but they're really not. The location of where, once a shape takes place, then that once an outer body shape takes place, it very rapidly determines everything else. Where the fin is going to be located and how high and long and all these kind of things will be determined. There's only certain shapes that can be. Once you make one line, then you have predetermined a lot of other lines. This is Chinese, and again the Chinese understood this clearly. This is a real building, and again every little, like where this line was, where this line was, where this line was, and this one, relative to each of all the other one, the total height compared to any of the other aspects of this is all based on sacred geometry and primarily the phi ratio. And if you really got in here and you looked at the height of the doors and the width of the doors and how far the doors were apart and how far the edge of the door was to the edge of the wall and all this kind of stuff, you would see this incredible sacred geometry going on and throughout all of that. And what it does is it gives you this funny feeling when you look at it. All this geometry that's around the world is based on this. When you look at it, it just feels like looking at a sunset or something. It feels like, I don't know exactly how to say it. This geometry has often been called the mathematics of beauty. Because when we see these kinds of things in form, we say, gee, that's beautiful.
This man did a study, and he had on Channel 13 these dancers all wear these black leotards, and on all of the joints they had white spots. And he had people watch the dance, and he had several different choreographers do something. And everybody basically agreed on certain dances as being really nice or pleasant to watch or comfortable. And when they put this onto a screen, it made geometric patterns with all the white things. And if it was one of the dances that everybody enjoyed, it all worked out mathematically. And if it was something that people said that just wasn't right about the dance, it didn't work out. And what they determined was that the mind does everything mathematically, and whether you like something or don't like it, whether you determine whether it's beautiful or not, is all based on the math. And they showed it through this. It was really cool. They showed it on the dance.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I agree with that. Well, you do. I mean, everything we do is mathematical, though. At least everything from the left side of our brain is. We do have this freedom from the other side, which is not. But we also have a part of our brain, our male logical side, that is just like the female side is free and experiential also. There's spirals in sunflower seeds. There's spirals in the way that pine cone seeds are. Spirals in the nautilus shell. In fact, almost all seashells that you take out, you're going to see all these intimate spirals moving through them. Where does it come from? Okay, we're the measuring stick of the universe. It's got to be in our body. Always, no matter what you're looking for, you can look to yourself to find the answer. And here's that same shape around here. And remember I did this down there. Well, this form, which we derived straight out of the human body, all you got to do is connect this line to that line, and you get a form called the golden mean, or the golden mean rectangle, and which looks like this. This would have been the human body. This would be the diagonal, and this is the one that would come over here. Connect these together, and this is the golden mean rectangle. The golden mean rectangle is this, basically. You take the shorter edge of the rectangle, and you come down the same distance and form a square in it, based upon whatever this edge is. What's left over is another golden mean rectangle in proportion to this one, only it's faced this way rather than this way. You take the shorter edge and make another square, and you have another golden mean rectangle. Take the shorter edge and make another square, and you have another golden mean rectangle. And then another square, and another golden mean rectangle, and another square, and another golden mean square. And that will go on forever. And you can go out the other way. You can take the longer edge and make a square, and that's a bigger golden mean rectangle. And then you can take the longer edge and make another square, and that'll be another golden mean rectangle. So it'll go in forever, and it'll go out forever with no beginning and no end. And you have two primary lines of energy that move through this. If you take the diagonals across here, which is a square root of 2 triangle, across here, and the diagonal comes this way, and the diagonal, that is the male energy of a spiral. And if you take the arcing curve across here, and then here, and then here, and such, this is the female energy of a golden mean spiral. Both of them are there every time at once. You usually see in nature the female part of it that manifests, though it isn't always true. A good example of that is the bismuth crystal. The bismuth crystal looks just like this. That's how its shape is. It's the male part of the spiral, but almost always it's the female part of the spiral that is formed. And if you take the diagonals of a golden mean rectangle, from this point to this one, to this diagonal, and there's another one that I didn't draw on here from here, they will locate the exact center. Well, this shape is real important in life too. It's a logarithmic curve. It has been said by other sacred geometry people that if you take from the navel and draw a line across the imaginary square around there, that this is a golden mean rectangle around there. And it's been said that you would then be able to draw a golden mean rectangle around, or logarithmic spiral that would come around, and it would focus exactly on the diagonal going from here to here. I believe that's almost true. And I'll have to explain in a moment what I mean. I personally do not believe that there are any logarithmic spirals in existence naturally forming. And I'll have to explain myself here in a moment. But this is real close to the truth. And that if you were to take this line here, this one here that forms a square, and continue it up, then that's another one. That's another golden mean rectangle, or close to it. And then if you took this line over here, that's another one. And if you continue that around, you'd find that there are 8 of them. There are 8 of these logarithmic golden mean rectangles around the human body, associated with the 8 possible diagonals. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 possible diagonals, and there are 8 golden mean rectangles that spiral around the body, where these 8 spiraling forms of energy come and terminate in these 8 places around the body in this pattern, right around the original 8 cells that are located in the precise center of that pattern. Leonardo drew these lines on the body, and if you drew the lines down from where he put them on there, it forms this primary grid where it shows these 4 places in the middle and these 8 places around the outer edge, which happen to be the squares where the 8 primary spirals come in and focus in on. If you complete that grid totally, you would find that it's a grid of 64 squares, and which has a direct relationship to the I Ching and a lot of other things, and the DNA molecule and other stuff. But I'm going to stop that just for a moment and come back and address something, and that is this statement that I made that I don't believe that it was a logarithmic spiral. A logarithmic spiral is an irrational number, as we showed before. It has no end, and it is a spiral that has no beginning and no end. And it's something it's elusive. You can't get it all. Can't get a hold of the whole thing, and this whole thing of having no beginning and no end is very hard for us as humans to deal with. We have the part in us that can deal with something that has no end. That's pretty easy, but we have at least I do. I have a really hard time with something that has no beginning. Just think about it. Think about something that has no beginning. You go. You can go on forever once it's started, but once it isn't. But it's hard because we are geometrical in nature, and which always has a center. And if we can't find a center, our mind just doesn't know how to deal with that. Well, that's because it's an irrational number. It's irrational. And so what life has done is really ingenious. I mean, it is the most brilliant thing that I've ever seen. That life has figured out a way to get around this problem. It's like God said to life, okay, do this thing that's impossible. And we said, it's impossible. And then we said, oh, but I know a way. I know how I can do this. And this is what happened. There was a man named Leonardo Fibonacci. he was a little bit almost contemporary with Leonardo da Vinci, a couple hundred years before. And he was an interesting person. He was kind of a monk type that used to walk through forests and everything to relax in the forest, right brain stuff. But at the same time, his left brain was clicking on all the time. And he kept noticing the mathematics of the plant life and everything around there. And as I understand it was this plant that triggered it. It's called a sneezeworth plant. He probably smelled it and sneezed him, and it's never been the same since or something. But what it was is he noticed the leaf pattern on it. A sneezeworth plant comes up and has one leaf, and then it grows one more, and then it grows two, and then it grows three, and then 5, and then 8, and it has 13 flowers. There's that 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. And he wrote that down, and he started noticing, and these were the things he wrote down. He found out that lilies and of course there's lots and more examples than these, but this is what he got. Lilies and irises had 3 petals, and buttercups and larkspurs and columbines had 5, and some delphiniums had 8, corn marigolds had 13, some asters had 21, and daisies almost always had either 34, 55, or 89 petals. And he looked at that and he said, hey, there's something there. So we had this sequence of 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55. Again, we showed you this one once before, where if you add 3 to 5, you get 8, and 5 to 8, you get 13, and 8 and 13, you get 21, etc., like that. And that sequence became known as the Fibonacci or Fibonacci sequence, depending on how you want to say it. Here's an example of the hibiscus flower, which has 5 petals facing out this way, and the stamen comes out in 5 petals facing down the other way. Pentagon facing one way, pentagon facing the other way. Of course, when we look at plants, we don't really think of them as being geometrical, but they are. And this is what life did to solve the problem. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 35, 89, 1, 2, 3, 5, 13, 21, 34. I'll go this far on it. Remember this number of the phi equals 1.618. We'll go that far on it. And look what happens when you divide the one term into the previous term. If you divide 1 into 1, it equals 1. Now 1 is a lot smaller than this number. And if you divide 1 into 2, you get 2, which is a lot bigger than this number. If you divide 2 into 3, you get 1.5, which is smaller than this number. If you divide 3 into 5, you get 1.66, I believe. Yes, which is greater. If you divide 5 into 8, you get 1.60, which is under the number. 8 into 13 is 1.625, which is slightly smaller, greater. 13 into 21 is 1.615, just under. 21 into 34 is 1.619, just over. 34 into 55, 1.6176, just under. 55 into 89, 1.6181, just over. 89 to 144, 1.6179775. 44 into 233, 1.61805. It's called, in mathematics, it's called asymptotically reaching a limit. It will just keep getting closer and closer and closer and closer as the numbers increase. It'll never reach it. but it'll get so close, you can't tell it apart. You can't see it. And so when you look at things in life, like, for example, well, let me just, I'll show you an example in a moment. This will be a geometrical a view of what you're doing. Here's these 4 places that around the human body. Remember there's 4 spots we talked about in the basis? And there's 8 squares around it. We're going to pick one like that one right there. And we're going to take the diagonal across one of those little squares and use that as our measuring stick. And we're going to call it 1. And so the diagonal that goes across that little square there will be 1. And then turn 90 degrees and go to the next term. 1. Turn 90 degrees and the next term is 2. So you go 2 diagonals. And then 3. Then 5. Then 8. Then 13. Then 21. Then 34. Then 55. Then 89. And you can see this spiral coming out, which will look just like that. This is the inside of a nautilus shell with this incredible precision moving out from there, this spiral that comes out like this. And each one of these chambers is more and more and more accurate in the creation of the spiral. But if you remember over here, in the beginning, as you go back toward the beginning, it gets less and less and less accurate, right? I mean, in the beginning, it's 1 and 2, I mean, which is way off, way under, and then closer. Look what happens when you go way back into the center. Can you see these first 3 ones? The first one came over here and hit the edge and bent. The next one came around and bent over because it wasn't even aimed right. And then 3 came out like that. And it wasn't until the 4th one that it started to fit properly, which is the closest. And it keeps getting. It actually was the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th one where it started getting close, which is down here when it just starts to begin to approximate. And so, if you looked at this, you would think that the nautilus shell made a mistake there in the beginning. You think, well, the guy didn't know what he's doing there. The mommy didn't know what he's doing when she made. This is an egg shell. It's for a squid that lives inside here, and the mommy creates this shell, and the nautilus blows gas through these little tubes that causes the shell to rise and come up to the surface where it feeds, and it sucks the gas out, and it sinks to incredible depths below. And it's really pretty ingenious. And then when it gets big enough, it leaves, doesn't need the shell anymore, and it leaves and needs to come up and float up on the surface. So you can see the very mathematics going on. Well, there's no mistakes in here. This is exactly proper according to what we have figured out on how to make this spiral. So this spiral isn't a logarithmic spiral, though many books will tell you that it is. It isn't logarithmic. It's a Fibonacci spiral. It's different. And remember, in Egypt, they had those 2 spirals that came off, and one was Fibonacci and one was there. We're going to show that again. The difference between these 2 is very, very important in life. This is the pine cone, and you have spirals running this way around it, and you also have spirals running this way around it. You have 2 counter-rotating spirals, one going one way and one going the other. And if you counted all the spirals going one way, and then you counted all the spirals going the other way, I don't care if it's a daisy or a sunflower or this or any other pineapple, anything else, you'll find that it's always 2 sequential Fibonacci sequence numbers that determine how many spirals go one way and spirals go the other way. And this, geometrically, is the summation of what we were just talking about. Over here is the golden mean rectangle, and this is a Fibonacci rectangle. This edge is the same as this edge on both of them, and this is 1, and this is 1, or this edge is 1, and this edge is 1. So these 2 squares are exactly the same. The difference lies in the part that's left over. In a Fibonacci one, it's just 2 more squares. But in a golden mean one, it's a little bit greater. Instead of being 0.5, it's 0.618. And so there's a difference of 0.118, this little tiny difference. And so as this one starts over here and goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, this one starts in here at some undefined place and comes out. And very, very quickly, you could not tell the two apart. Because this little tiny piece, geometrically, gets smaller and smaller and smaller, proportionate to the squares that get bigger and bigger and bigger. In other words, this square here, that proportion of 0.118 is very big. You see how much of it is, relative to the line, that's a big piece. Here's the same amount relative to this square, and that's a lot smaller. Relative to this square, that little piece is even smaller. And so what happens is that little piece is fixed, and it just goes to zero. You wouldn't think it, but from the Egyptian point of view, this is real important in understanding resurrection. The very chamber, the king's chamber, which many people said is a golden mean rectangle, is not. It is two perfectly equal squares. And the height of the king's chamber is 1/2 the diagonal. And this is all Fibonacci sequence stuff. This king's chamber, the sarcophagus sits over here, the inner end over here like this. And these proportions are not golden mean, they're Fibonacci. Because that was the key. It was the real key to, the very shape of the room was the key to what they were doing in there. You'll see when we get to that part of it. So this has no beginning and no end. This has a very, very definite beginning, but it doesn't necessarily have to have an end. And that's who we are. That's why we have a problem with something that has no beginning. So, is there any questions on this one statement? Yeah.
My question on that is that with the golden mean, doesn't that mean that it connects itself at one end? Somewhere or another along the line, if it doesn't have a beginning and an end, then it loops. Have you thought along those lines?
Well,
it's not in this dimension. I know that.
You can think along those lines, and that may be true. That would be a mathematical, theoretical approach to it. But purely from a geometrical image of the eye, if you have a vortex, that vortex can rotate in that direction forever, and it can go in forever. Absolutely forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Of course, all space is curved. And so you could probably come up with some kind of mathematics that might support that idea. But I'm not looking at it like that. But I could see what you're saying. But like the electromagnetic fields are the same way. They are all looping patterns, but they do not bend back on themselves. It's like red light and purple light don't meet. Red has a long wavelength, purple has a short wavelength, and instead of meeting, the purple goes into ultraviolet light and just transmutes into something different. And red light doesn't come from purple, but it comes from infrared. And so I don't know. But I hear what you're saying, but all I can say is I don't know. Yeah.
Does consciousness work in the Fibonacci spiral or in the logarithmic? And
I believe that consciousness works in Fibonacci, and everything that's about us is Fibonacci, or totally Fibonacci.
So then, potentially the wider our consciousness got in terms of more of a universal mind, the closer we get towards that ideal then, right?
The more closer that we would approach that mathematically. it very rapidly approaches it so quickly that there's just no way to visually see the difference. It doesn't take very long for that thing to expand out there before you just, you can't hardly have an instrument that can detect any difference. Yeah. It's pretty ingenious what we did. I mean, it really is. It's an amazing solution to a problem.
I think I might have missed an important transition point, because this whole discussion started upon the square within the circle.
And where are we going on with all this?
We're going with the drawing by Leonardo. It's not placed in the same way, and I don't quite understand how the perfection of all of the mathematics in there can happen when the square is not placed in the same proportion that it was in the original drawing, where it was directly in the center. It's moved down.
You mean in the original drawing that we started out in the very beginning?
Exactly, right. It was centered,
that's
and then with Leonardo,
the only that's what I was saying is that you missed an important little piece there. What is the next one in this? This goes back to it. Here it is. The difference in space. This is the center of the circle, right? This is the center of the square. That difference between the navel and the base of the spine is a sacred proportion. It happens to be the distance between the line of your arm, your hand, to the longest finger, which he also drew a line on the wrist showing that. That distance of your hand then there is identical to the same one between your navel and the base of the spine. And that is 1/2 the distance of here. In other words, if you could put that distance above your head, it would hit exactly 1/2. Meaning that if you brought the circle down to here, that shape that we started out with would happen. In other words, the perimeter of the square and the circumference of the circle are very, very, very close.
Well, I understand that the sacred proportion that you're talking about. So that was what prompted him to move it down and prove that the geometry still works out perfectly, because I would think that from the original drawing it would have to be placed perfectly in center, that the square would have to be centered within the circle at all times. The fact that he chose that sacred proportion to bring it down, I don't quite understand how it...
He wanted to show you that this is an important relationship, that when the square is around here, it's centered there, and that when the body will fit inside the circle, that will be centered on there, and that these two meet. That this is an important sacred relationship between the navel and the base of the spine. This is one way of showing that. He did a lot of really subtle things in here. For example, later on, and he did this in a lot of other works too, because he realized that this is true throughout nature. He's showing the energy field of a male. And he actually, as you're going to see a little later, he shows a star tetrahedral field on there. He did it by these simple little lines that you wouldn't, he hid it. But once you bring it out and you see it, it's the tetrahedral field for a man. But he knew that the female was a mirror image. It's an exact mirror image. The female and the male ones are mirror images. In other words, the male has its tetrahedral field like that, where the female has hers like that. It's a mirror image. And so in order to slyly tell you that, he wrote his writing so that the only way you can read it is with a mirror up to it. You have to hold a mirror up here to read this. And he knew that the mirror image extended throughout nature and everything. There was always these mirror images, the mirror images in the minds and all these things. This guy was really brilliant, and they were always secretly hiding everything, and he did it in very subtle ways that are extremely logical once you understand the way he's thinking. It took me a while to figure out how he thought, and after a while you'll see that this simple drawing has a hidden pattern behind it that is incredibly complex, that describes all these energy fields around the body. And the other thing that led me to think that there was really something here is that the mass consciousness around this particular drawing. In other words, we all have a real strong emotional feeling for this. It's being used constantly. It'll flash on a screen for one frame and we pick it up. We won't let go of it. We know that there's something real important here, all of us. We know there's something important, and we're not going to let it go. And yet, this has become one of his most important works, and it was a sketch. It wasn't meant even for public use. I mean, this is the Mona Lisa, which has become important, but this is really more popular than the Mona Lisa. It's reached deeper into our psyche than the very Mona Lisa. Why? Because there's a real powerful truth coming off that page, and we can't help but feel it. And when I unlay all of it, when I show you what he was into totally, I think you'll really know why that it's so powerful for us. We just don't have any choice. It's really important for us. Okay, remember we showed how this grid was here. Well, if you complete the grid, you complete all the lines. If he drew a line in the elbow that came down and just made that, make the line go all the way down. Make them all complete themselves all the way through. And you end up with a grid of 64 squares around the body. The head is one of these squares. The head size is exactly 1/64 of the whole thing that they laid out here. And you realize that it's interesting because now you know that 6 squares in a row like this is a Fibonacci rectangle. And so this is a series. Now the human body's still here. Here's the head, the feet coming across, and the arms coming across, and the feet down here. This is the center of the body. And this is a Fibonacci rectangle coming around here. This is also the blue one stretching up to here is another Fibonacci one. So you have all these Fibonacci rectangles that are in there. There is this thing, and what I'm about to show you could potentially change the planet's life, big time, if it ever gets out, and it's trying to, and it probably won't, because it's too big. But there's a new science coming out in the world. It's about ready to change everything. It'll have more influence if it ever gets out there than anything that's ever hit our planet before. It's called zero-point technology. There are certain places in a sine wave curve that are called zero point. I mean, there's technology out there right now that can replace every single thing that we have, just about, and using nothing but light. Just light, you can do anything you can think of. You can do things you can't even think of. And it's all based on, this is one way of looking at it. On a sine wave curve, there are 5 places where zero point is reached. That's here, 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 here. When we learn how, and we have already learned how, to stop light at these particular places and resume it in patterns at these places, things will be possible that would not normally be possible. This is where creation takes place. This is that place between maleness and femaleness. It's that place between the in-breath and the out-breath in meditation. And geometrically, it looks like this. Because this is the energy field of the grid around the body, or at least one of the earth bodies. We have 2 kinds of vortex energies. There's at least 2. There's 2 basic ones anyway. And one I would give the name of the white light spiral, and the other one the black light spiral. There's also the logarithmic spiral, which is different. And then, of course, you've got spiraling. There's one going one way and there's one going another way. So you got that gives you 5. Then you got 6. I don't know how many there are. I've never thought about it completely. But there's 2 basic kinds. One is white light and the other is black light. A white light spiral is this. Starting, remember that thing where we did 1, 1, 2 using the diagonals as our measuring stick. If you start up here in this corner, here's the center of the body. Here's these 8 places where these spiraling energies that terminate. And in that square, we come up here, and we call this is 1. We make a 90-degree turn, and we go 1. The next one is 2, which just hits the edge of this field. The next one is 3. 1, 2, 3, just hits the edge of the field. The next one is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just hits the edge of the field. Leaves exactly at 3 and goes out. So it goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, reflects inside the field and leaves. That's the white light spiral. But there's another possibility in there. Instead of starting from up here, you could start from down here. And this one goes 1, 1, 2, right through 0 point. 3 exactly reflects out. Leaves precisely at 2, and if you calculated it would hit the tip of there exactly. And it's like it's reflecting inside of a cube. The white light is the male. And all of the white light could come this way, but it could also come this way and reflect out. So you have one that could either rotate this way in or rotate this way in. But none of the white light spirals in any of these 8 places are going to even touch this blue area. All of the black light spirals, no matter which way you go, it's going to go 1, 1, 2 out this way, or if it came the other way, 1, 1, 2 this way. And as you look at them all, they're all going to pass right through this one place in the center called 0 point. The male one does not. The female one always passes through 0 point. This is the reason that the male, or the reason that the female only has the womb. This is the technology of the womb, the geometry of the womb. It's the geometry of creation. And so what they're now learning is how to create things right from 0 point. Once you're in 0 point, it's the great void. Anything's possible. Anything at all. And we're just now emerging out to begin to understand this. And science is bulging at the seams trying to figure out how to deal with it. And these, again, can be determined from the human body, from the very energy fields inside the body. These fields, by the way, that come around are really Fibonacci, and when you see them as Fibonacci, they form loop-to-loop patterns of energy, reflecting energies of patterns around the body that can either stay within or leave. They can leave. I don't quite know what all that means yet, and I've always been waiting for them to tell me. I know it has an important aspect in terms of meditation, but I don't know exactly what it means yet. But I figured I would show it anyway. This, the 0 point technology that we were talking about before, has, I'm going to show you right now just the male field. This is the entire male field of the lines of energy that would come off of a human body, just from those 8 places. These are all the male spiraling lines that come out. And I've shown you 4 of the female trackings. So you have one blue spiral coming out like that, one yellow one coming like that. You've got I don't know what that is, a purple one going like that, and a pink one going out like that. Notice these hearts. A set of hearts facing this way, then a set of hearts facing this way, then another set of hearts facing up this way, and then a bigger set of hearts facing over this way, and they're all at these 90 degrees angles to each other. You're going to see these later on, that they're real important, in a lot of the research that's going on. None of them pass through those center 4 squares. That's male, this is the female. And the female, these are all the grid lines coming off of that, and I just attracted to the spiral, the Fibonacci spiral is coming off there, and you see a heart facing this way, then a heart facing that way, then a heart facing this way, getting bigger and bigger. This is it's the energy levels of creation itself, both in male and female, and you're just going to have to watch what this means a little later as more things unfold here. Hopefully this will start meaning more and more to you. Okay. Well, only that it is the womb. What the female contains this organ in her, but in the center of that organ is this 0 point place, which is based on this geometries. And that you can, who's that? You said that? Yeah. And that you can, when we talk about the Merkaba, when we talk about some other places, I'll bring back this thing. The Merkaba is just a huge 0 point field that can take you through the great void, but you can create directly from it. Absolutely directly.
What is so important to understand about that 0 point technology? Is it that the whole power of the universe resides in this 0 point?
The 0 point is the great void. It's where it all began.
Where everything becomes possible from that point?
It's where, from that point, a change in something. You could be passing into 0 point. We keep passing through 0 point all the time. Every time we take a breath, we go through 0 point. But usually we pass through it and come right back out the other side with no change, meaning nothing changes. But at 0 point, you can go into it, make a change, and in 1 second come, and everything's totally different. Completely different.
So this will have to do with the CDs that you can manifest from the Merkaba point
Yes.
of view?
You don't need to know it in the kind of detail. Again, like I said, you don't need to know this. You just need to know about it. You know.
In other words, you can manifest anything if you know how to do the shift as you go through the void, through the with your breath.
Once you go into 0 point through the Merkaba, then it is possible then to completely heal your body instantly of anything.
By following your
just
breath.
for an example.
How do you know when you go through the void and you do the switch when to do it?
You'll know. I'll talk about it. You'll know for sure.
When we go to the next level of consciousness, our shape changes. We get taller, necks get longer, possibly.
That's right, though I haven't talked about that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does the same ratios?
Yeah,
where
sure.
our waistline is up to our chest, we still have the same ratio?
Well, not necessarily that they would. In this body, the phi ratio is between the feet and here and there. If you were to look at the phi ratios in a Syrian body, they're still going to be there, but it may be that the navel is in the phi ratio to the knees or something else or like that, that kind of ratio. I haven't studied that body, so I don't know. But it's just like looking at any other body. The same is going to be true of any extraterrestrial anywhere. It's all the same laws. It's the same everywhere. I just don't know what it is because I haven't. You got to mathematically sit down and work it out. Yeah.
Did you say that the Fibonacci spiral has no beginning and no end?
No, it has a beginning.
It has a beginning.
It starts at 1.
Okay.
Or you could say it starts at 0.
But the golden mean does not?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It potentially has no beginning or no end. If you're moving down it, if you're moving down a theoretical one, you would never find the end. If you're moving out, you'd never find the end. Whereas if you're moving out a Fibonacci one, you would never find the end, possibly. But if you're moving in, you would definitely come to the place where it began. if you study vortex mechanics, and there is a man named Walter Baumgartner, if you really want to know what it's all about. He was the head of the Walter Russell School. And I just think I just put his name on the list here recently. But he gives outstanding workshops on vortex mechanics. They're outstanding. And just one second. And what happens is if you have a vortex of a logarithmic spiral, it will just keep going in and in and in and compressing and compressing and compressing and compressing. If you have a Fibonacci spiral coming in, it will come in and in and in and in and in and in. And when it gets to 1, it will click over. It will come back over here. It will go 5, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. And so it'll go like that. It'll just come right back. It'll reverse polarity relative to itself. So even though it's male, everything's got a male and a female, and so one of those is going to be male, and then it's going to be coming out the opposite one, the female, whichever it is. Or if it's rotating in this way, then it'll still come back out the opposite polarity, going out the other way. And so that has a different kind of effect than something that's just going like this. His works are amazing. He's got some of the things. He's got most of his work is with water, and he's got water wants to rotate in a very specific spiraling energy, and he's got a glass tube in the exact way that water wants to run. This tube in exactly the way. But because it's moving exactly the way it wants to, it creates all this energy. And you can hold this light bulb next to it, it's not even touching it, and it turns it on. It's really pretty good. He's got another one where he's got the vortex energy, probably logarithmic, because the energy moves in, and it moves in so small that the water, when it comes out, it's just like one molecule attached to the other. It's just like this little thin knife, and it'll cut right through steel. It's just water, and it'll right through steel.
My question was about the free energy machine, which I believe he is also working with. And is it related to this illustration here on the board?
Yes. All your free energies are related to this or to 0 point. And that's, you can either look at it like that, or you can look at it like the geometry. But they don't know the geometry. All the people, at least all the people I know are working out, they're thinking of it more along this line. And in rotating fields, which are based upon Merkaba. They're basically Merkaba sciences that they're trying to develop, connecting in with tachyon or fourth dimensional prana energy to bring it in from there. And though everybody's trying to get these free energy machines, they already got free energy machines, and we can't use them.
When we go through this home shift, is Earth itself going to be re-inhabited by those of us who've made it through to come back with greater technologies? And what would
No,
technology?
we won't need technology. The whole thing with technology, I think, should be left for a little while, because until I get to the place where I can really talk about where technology came from and what it's all about, because there is technology is not our friend. It is the problem. Yes.
Secret is in God-centered technology.
That's correct.
Not the Merkaba.
That's right. The living fields of life based upon our connection to all life.
This is why I'm here. And I'm sure this is why everyone else is here. And this is the kind of thing that moves. You can do things alchemically.
That's right.
That you would never be able to do otherwise.
This is exactly.
And you can utilize regular technology with God-centered technology to create all kinds of things that you would never begin to dream. 51% is passing in metaphysical kinds of things that I've learned. Not only that, but 5% will change a whole population.
Yeah, I think it's 7 actually.
Well, to really, I suppose, solidify it, but then that's about as much that takes a magnet a charge.
Uh-huh.
But
The
it
reason I
works
said
with the population.
because in advertising, as soon as you reach 7% of the population, the next morning, 100% of the population knows your product.
This is how we're going to be moving, and this is what's been demonstrated in these isolated incidents of the things that have happened. So it is happening already all around us, and it'll be accelerated because the energies have accelerated.
Yeah. But we've got to go in the internal direction, because to try to find a technology to heal the problems of technology, though it seems like an answer in a way, as you get deeper and deeper into this thing about technology, I think you'll maybe come up with the same conclusion I have. It's just an illusion. We just keep getting deeper and deeper into the technology. I've seen technologies with my eyes that are so clean, so beautiful, so awesome, that you would think they would be the greatest thing in the world. At least I thought it was. And then I had the angels come to me and say, nope. And when I came back from that experience, I expressed my thing to the angels, saying, this is incredible stuff, this is the most advanced thing I've ever seen. And the angel said to me, no, you're not right. I said, well, what do you mean? I mean, that's amazing. They go, no. And they said to me, supposing you're in your house and you get cold, and so you say to yourself, I'm going to invent a heater. And so you invent a heater, and whatever it is, could be a free energy heater. It doesn't matter what it is, how sophisticated it is. You invent something to heat your room, and it heats your room, and it works. And you think you just got better off. But from their point of view, what you just did was give your innate power to an object. And you're now weaker, and you're addicted to the object. You now have to have this object. And so as the technology keeps growing, you make lights, and you do this, and you do this, and you keep going on and on and on and on. As an individual, as a God-centered individual, you get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker until finally you can't live without the technology. When you could have you could have heated the room in the first place just with the Merkaba, with your own energies, with your connection to God. And so what they said is the more advanced the technology becomes, the more separated from God they become, and the weaker as a race they become.
Would it be possible for us to live without eating?
Oh, you won't eat after this. Once you get...
That's one of
Are you hungry right now? Throw that man an apple or something.
It's one of our problems, you see. we have to eat. But I know that some of us, like the masters in the Far East, for example, there was a wonderful book called Lives and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. And they seem to live on the prana. They don't eat anymore.
We didn't eat before we fell. And in fact, that was one of the first signs that the Ascended Masters knew that we had really, how far down we had fallen when we all started eating food again.
They seem to be able to make a bubble, for example, of protection for the night, and be very comfortable in the middle of a storm.
It's the understanding of the Merkaba. If you're in the Merkaba and you got it rotating, you could stay warm and everything, all your needs, whatever they are, completely satisfied without doing anything, without having anything at all. You don't have to sit there and get dripping wet. You just have the water just go right around your field.
Can you teach us how to do that?
That's what I'm trying to do. All we have to do is remember how to begin to activate it, which is breathing the prana down through the pineal gland, coming out, activating the field in that kind of way, and beginning the rotating process. So you have one set that will rotate this way. Just an entire set like this. It'll begin to rotate like that. The one that rotates to your left counterclockwise, is male in nature. It's electrical, and it is literally your mind. It's knowledge. And the one that rotates this way, which is an entire set, just like you see going there, is female. It's magnetic in nature, and it is literally your emotional body. And so when you happen to have just the right thoughts rotating this way, and just the right emotions rotating this way, then this phenomena takes place, which is called the Merkaba. And so that's why it just takes remembering how to do it, what it was about. The field is set up, and then the testing of the field to see that it's really real. And once the mind, and then once you have just even one experience, just one, you will never be the same again.
Does this only happen in the physical awareness, or is it possible to experience this maybe in dream time as well?
Well, you can remember what it was all about in dream time. Like in dream time, you may remember yourself flying, because that's the other thing you could do, is you can just lift off and fly with Merkaba. You could do it that way, or you could just simply disappear here and reappear where you want to be. The potential is directed by intention and what's possible. But you just have to, I mean, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. We're not quite to the, these are the kinds of things we'll be talking about on the last day. We got to wait when we get there. I know, we're all ready, let's go. Nobody wants to be here anymore, I know. It's that way all over the world. I mean, everybody's fed up with it. So who wants to, it's really...
They used to teach this in the monasteries in Tibet.
Oh, yeah. Sure. This is what, in Tibet, the final test was after you had done 108,000 prostrations and throwing your mala beads against all the walls and the temples, and you walked around all the mountains, and you'd done all the various things. And when you got really, really old and you're almost ready to die, then they told you what it was all about. Maybe they would tell you, and what they would, and then they would tell you what it was, and then they would see if it was really, if you could really do it, and they would sit you in a ledge out there that's maybe 30,000 feet in the air, it's 100 below zero, and you're freezing and everything like that. And they'd take all your clothes off, and they'd put wet blankets around you, and they'd say, dry them. And that guy, of course, would very quickly sit in there and start doing his breathing and get on all the fields. Pop that baby out there. It's 80 degrees in here, which would only be just inside the Merkaba shape, which looks like a flying saucer, would instantly be 80 degrees, if that's what he set it for. And very quickly, you would see a circle of snow melt in a circle around this person. And very quickly, he would dry these blankets and stand up. And he would demonstrate in real time to his teacher that he had done this. And Omni Magazine just videoed this. Yeah, they were allowed to video it. They sat there and watched one of these guys do it. They allowed them. They would have never allowed this before, but we're ready. I mean, we're ready for this stuff. And they said, watch this. And he just did it. No. I don't know whatever's going to... I never know what they're going to have me do. I don't know what's going to happen. But this is where we're heading. This is possible. This is real stuff. And this is nothing compared to where we're going. Because where we're going is we're going to... That's nothing. We're going to create the very universe we're in, second by second, and everything in it. This way. There are 5 very, very special shapes in the universe. Anyone who's been involved in architecture or sacred geometry or any kind of geometry or various fields of engineering will probably know these shapes. The most familiar one is the cube. There's 5 of them altogether. I'll just quickly give them to you. There's the tetrahedron, tetra meaning 4, because there's 4 faces. And there is the hexahedron, or the cube, hexa meaning 6 faces. Then there is the octahedron, meaning 8 faces. And the icosahedron, meaning 20 faces. And finally, the dodecahedron, meaning 12 faces. Now, each one of these, or all 5 of these things, has something very special about them that no other forms in the universe have. There's certain rules, and the rules are, if you could create a form that has only one edge length throughout the entire form, only one face, this only has one face, same edge length, only one angle in it. This is 90 degrees in this one. Every angle is 90 degrees. There's only one angle, one face, and one edge, and all the points of this substance would fit on the surface of a sphere. That criteria comes up with 5 shapes, the ones I just gave you. And believe me, they have really tried to find other ones, and they don't exist. There is a way to create 2 more, which are based on motion and movement, but that's a high-level subject. It's not important for right now. And so you'll say to yourself, well, again, so what? What about these shapes? Well, they're called, they were eventually named after Plato, so they're called the Platonic solids. Though I don't know if that's a really good name or not. He was not the one that invented it, and of course nobody invented them. They've just been here since the beginning. And if you read into sacred geometry books about these 5 shapes, I'm trying to keep these things from reflecting in people's eyes. They're like mirrors. Maybe I should get one that's not quite so big mirror. And if you read books like Keith Kirchlow or Buckminster Fuller or Robert Lawler or any of these guys, you begin to realize the importance of these. They're like the major primary building blocks of the universe. Their relationship is just everywhere in all kinds of ways, throughout nature and everywhere. And it's just amazing how many places there are that they have importance in. And yet, when you come right down to it and you ask any of these guys or read any of these books to try to find out what generated them, where did they come from, what is the source that was behind these things, there's silence. Nobody knows. And but what the angels say it is, there is your source. That's what created them. It was the first system of knowledge that came out of Metatron's cube. You're now looking at, well, with the lines I've got on this page right now, you're looking at 4 of them. And I'll explain where the 5th one is in just a moment. And I'm going to pull them off of here one at a time so you can see them, okay? And we'll talk about what they are in a little bit. Let's just get them out of here first. So if you take out this hexagonal pattern out, and inside here you see another hexagonal pattern, and then the 3 lines that go through the middle, and erase all the rest of them, you get this. Does everybody see that? Does everybody see that that's a cube within a cube? Who doesn't? It's a cube looking at it from this edge. Can you see that now? You can? So you're looking at a cube from this view. Well, that's where your first one is. Now, if you came back here and you were to this triangle here, and this triangle here, and then this little triangle and this little one in here, and then the lines that go through the middle like that. When you do that, then you get this. It looks like a Star of David. Now what that is, though, is a three-dimensional shape, a very specific one, which is hard to see what that is on there, but if you shade it in like this, it's a star tetrahedron, like this. Can you see it? Does everybody see it? So when you get the tetrahedrons, you get two of them interlocked. One interlocked with the other one. All five of these shapes are masculine energy. But everything has a polarity. So even within maleness, there's femaleness and maleness. And within femaleness, there's maleness and femaleness. And the same way with geometry. Though all five of these shapes are male relative to the sphere, some of these shapes are female and some of them are male. We'll see about that in just a moment. If you were to take out this, so you see this rectangle, which happens to be a golden mean rectangle. And if you were to take that one out and this golden mean rectangle that's down in here, and then it's taking the big one, if you were to take this line that goes from here up to here, and that line that goes from there to there, you'll notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, and then you'll have, from there you've got another one coming down to here, and down to here, and what that forms is an octahedron. I'll come over here and I'll show you. So what you now have is one of these, only it's sitting at this angle like that, with one of the faces flat to the other one. So it's got a flat part like that. It's sitting like that to the screen. Does everybody see that?
It's hard, that's a hard one.
It's harder, I know. It's harder. But you've got an octahedron. Mathematically, that's the view of this thing. Because when you turn, like this is a square, right? It's a square.
Right.
But when you turn it, it becomes a rectangle. And if you turn it just right, it becomes a golden mean rectangle, which happens to be the view that is right there. So it's an octahedron inside of an octahedron. Now the next one even gets harder. That's where it goes. If you erase certain lines of the original Metatron's cube, you'll come up with this. And this one is an icosahedron. You're looking at this form up there. And I know it's hard. You have a pentagonal cap on the top, a pentagonal cap on the bottom, and 10 little triangles around the middle. And you can actually count each one of them. This is one face, two faces, and then this one from over here is three faces. This is the fourth face, and this is the fifth face, forming the cap. There's one on the bottom. And then if you carefully count the triangles moving around here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is 6, 7, 8, 9, and then this one is 10. Your 10 triangles move around there. And that is identical to what you were just looking at a moment ago. Oh, this is a drawing by Sulamith Wolfing. And with the Christ child inside of the icosahedron, it's extremely appropriate because this is the doorway to Christ consciousness. And baptism is the doorway into Christianity, right? This, in ancient terms, was water. Like fire, earth, air, water, ether. This is water. And this is the baptism of the doorway into Christ consciousness. So you can see the line is straight across in the back, like it was on the other one, straight across in the bottom, forming the 5 different patterns. Now the fifth one, the dodecahedron. I mean, they told me it was there, and I started looking for it, and I couldn't find it. And I looked, and I looked, and I spent 20-something years looking for this thing, and I never could find it. And Mackie went to look after me looking for 20-something years, and in 3 days she found a part of it anyway that was the first time I'd ever found anything. I'll show you what she found in just a moment. She did something I never even dreamed of. She took Metatron's cube and rotated it by the phi ratio, and this grid came out, which was incredible, which she calls Eve's grid, the Eve's grid. And I'll show you that in a moment. And she didn't even know what it is, and I'm beginning to understand what that one is right now. But, so I started looking for this shape, couldn't find it, and about 2 weeks ago, in the last workshop, somebody, one of the students in here said, "Hey, you didn't connect a certain point to a certain point." I go, "I didn't?" And I realized on here's the whole Metatron's cube. I had not connected this point to that point all the way around in the whole pattern. And so I had 12 missing lines on Metatron's cube. I don't know, I just never saw it. And so this is truly Metatron's cube here. Now that's all the spheres connected by all of them, like we were supposed to, like they instructed me to do. And now with this pattern, you're now looking directly at a dodecahedron. It pops right out. Here it is in the red lines. Can everybody see that? Can you see the red lines on the page in there? The angles of these things, that the lines drawn from there, exactly make the reflecting angles of all the faces, and you get a pentagonal shape there, and one there. These are the other 5 sides at the sharp angles, and it wraps back around, and you have the other side of it also. I got to see it for a second. If you were to draw that line in there, that's the pentagon on the back side. There's the pentagon back on the other side. The whole thing is totally three-dimensionally wrapped all totally around. The entire thing, the whole thing, is completely there. And I went, wow! And so you're the first ones that's ever seen this. Nobody's ever seen this before. And I was very excited about that. So, and there'll be another one, a bigger one on the outside of this whole thing that'll enclose all this if you want to work it through. So, there were all 5 of the shapes. This is a clearer pattern of it. And I have a whole bunch of other slides if I wanted to do it, showing you how you can take the spheres out of the flower of life, and there's a way where you can show the ratios, come up with the length of an edge of a tetrahedron relative to a cube, relative to a hexagon, relative to a 5-sided edge of a 5-sided pentagon, relative to a hexagon. All 4 of those edges are all lines that are lengths found in Metatron in the flower of life, but they're all interrelated to each other. And this was the pattern that Mackie found by turning Metatron's cube into a certain ratio, the phi ratio. It has a central 5-sided pattern with a full 5 that come off of there, and then if you just take one more off of each one of those, that's an unfolded dodecahedron. But this is an interesting pattern. There's a man named Penrose who made the Penrose pattern. What's this? Roger Penrose? Is that his name? I can't remember. And he did it. See, they've always tried to make 5-sided shapes that will cover a floor, tile patterns. But they never could figure out how to do it. And so he came up with this little shape here and another little shape, which was a wider angled one. If you took that shape that would form in there and put those 2 together, and you can make Penrose patterns that will cover a flat surface. And it was kind of a game for a long time. And recently in Scientific American, they would have people. It was just sort of like this game that was going along between all the Scientific American people who subscribed to that, to who could come up with the newest Penrose pattern. And then out of that, somebody had an insight You see, there's something called diffraction patterns where they shoot electron beams, X-ray patterns rather, down through crystalline structures, and they can see where the atoms are located. And they only were able to come up with certain patterns and thought that there were only certain kinds of crystalline structures in existence. And then one day somebody theorized that there had to be these, based on the Penrose patterns. And recently, and we're talking about like 2 years ago, they discovered a new kind of crystal in existence, which the crystal has always been there, we just suddenly became aware of it. It's called a quasi-crystal now. And they've now been able to come up with the patterns, the understanding of it, and it's opened up a whole new level of crystallology, I guess. Is that right? Crystallology? And the meaning of it is they suspect that pretty soon they're going to be able to make metals, say, about 10 times as hard as diamond, for example, based on this. And lots of other applications will start coming out. This is one that they don't know about yet. This is one based on pentagons and the other one. Every single line in here is in the phi ratio, golden mean proportion. Every single thing in it, and all crossing patterns. Every line that you can connect together synthetically through there is golden mean ratio lines. And it's got to be one of the primary grids. It's an area of research I'm going to get into at one point. That eventually in quasi-crystal studies, I'll bet you, they come up with this grid as being one of the primary generating sources of the patterns.
Is it similar to a honeycomb?
To a what?
Honeycomb.
Now that's a hexagonal pattern, which is a little different. So you got these 5 shapes. Now we showed you where they came from, how they came out of the flower of life through the fruit of life pattern. And I want to just quickly show you that the number relationship. This one has 4 faces, 4 corners, and 6 edges. And the tetrahedron is a real special one. The hexagon or the cube has 6 faces, 8 corners, and 12 edges. The cube, in sacred geometry, they have something that's called a dual. A dual is, if you connect the faces, this is one way of getting to duals, you connect the centers of the faces of this one, and what you get is an octahedron. Okay? They're duals of each other. And look at the numbers. This one has 6 faces, 8 corners, and 12 edges, and this one has 8 faces, 6 corners, and 12 edges. Then you have the dodecahedron, which has 12 faces, 20 corners, and 30 edges. If you connect the centers of a dodecahedron together, you get an icosahedron. And again, 12 faces, 20 corners, 30 edges, 20 faces, 12 corners, 30 edges. They are duals of each other. You can take this as your major building block, and you can take 2 tetrahedrons and slip them together into a star tetrahedron like this one. Take 2 tetrahedrons, pass them through each other into a 3-dimensional Star of David, and you have a cube. Okay? You can take 5 tetrahedrons and put them together in an icosahedral cap type thing, and those will assemble together into a dodecahedron. But it takes 60 of them to do it. And then the dual of that will create one of these. I've been asked many times about why there are 72 orders of the Great White Brotherhood. And if you've probably read this many times before in other places, I don't know. But there are 72 orders, and the first order is is Alpha and Omega, Order of Melquisedek, and the last order is the Brotherhood of the 7 Rays. Those are the 2 orders that I'm connected with, and I know very little about what's in the middle. And But the reason there are 72 orders is because these 72 orders have one thing. They are to create the Christ consciousness grid. The creation pattern is that there's 60 tetrahedrons in here, which is the building block of this, and there are 12 points that are the center points in the center of each one of these that form the icosahedron. And the 60 plus the 12 is the 72. And so each one of the orders is working with a different facet or area of the grid of the Christ consciousness to create this on the earth. Remember, we started as an octahedron, and that's a view of an octahedron from there. That's that view of the octahedron. I like to use different ones. There's three symmetrical views of each one of these. And so remember, we started with the octahedron, then we went to the sphere. That's the central column, which is the neutral column. Over here, the tetrahedron and the cube is literally your left brain. Remember I said how the triangle and the square was the logical side that was forward on the male? And this is the female side, the right side of the brain, either of a person or a planet or anything else. And this is based on 5, the pentagon. And so is this based on 5, again, when you see that it's this thing. And so this is female, this is male, and this is child or neutral aspect of the things, of life. They have, in terms of mathematical relationships, they're endless. You could just go on. You could write reams of books about all the mathematical possibilities that are all in there. They're all interconnected again and again and again. In alchemy, there is something called fire, earth, air, and water that we hear about so often. And the ancients believed that the fire, earth, air, and water and 2 other substances were the key to everything. They were really, they usually only talk about those 4. That's because they leave out the most important one. They always keep that one secret. And that one's sometimes referred to as ether. But ether and prana are the same thing. Or ether and prana and tachyon energy are the same thing. It's all the same thing. And again, this was the most sacred shape of the ancients. And this is the one that was ether. They all have amounts, and I'll tell you what they are right now. This is according to the Pythagorean school and tied back to Egypt. This one here, the tetrahedron, was fire. And it's a pyramid. There's 3-sided, 4-sided, and 5-sided pyramids. And pyramid means fire in the midst. And the cube is earth. It's denseness and matter. And the octahedron is air. It's the 8th element of the periodic table. And the icosahedron is water. And the dodecahedron is ether. And the little sphere, the sphere, I have a little sphere. The sphere is voidness. There's 6 elements that create the universe. Voidness, fire, earth, air, water, and ether. And they all have shape, as everything does. And they happen to have the primary shapes of the universe. So these 6 shapes of the sphere, the tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, icosahedron, and the dodecahedron are the ABCs of the alphabet, of the whole thing. They are what create the underlying structures. All structures are based upon them. And these are just like some of the mathematical relationships, how one thing fits inside the next and fits inside the next. In sacred geometry, it's called nesting, where one cube will fit to the next one, will form the next one, will go to the next one, and you just couldn't do this normally. It acts like magic. It's amazing what it can do. to show you one shape, here's a cube. Does everybody see the cube? Can you see the centers of each of the faces are connected together, forming a little tiny octahedron in the middle? Does everybody see that? Can you see it? Does anybody not see it? It's a little, one of these guys in the middle, sitting like that. So you have those two linked together. At the same time, it's a star tetrahedron. Which is one of those guys that you see sitting right there. So the star tetrahedron has an octahedron in the middle of it. If you're going to make one, you can just take an octahedron and make those little triangular shapes and stick them on each of the faces, and you got one of those. And then you can make fancy ones like this. Isn't that pretty? Okay, now, I'm about to take this abstract information that came out of the first system of the fruit of life and apply it directly into life so you can see how life uses it. We're going to first look at crystals, and then we're going to look at biological life forms like you and see how in these two areas that these are used.
I don't understand those two, why those are feminine.
It's kind of like understanding why a straight line is male and a curved line is female. It's something that you begin to intuit after a while. The longer you work in this stuff, you keep coming up with these patterns tend to be things that are associated with male, and these patterns tend to be associated with female. For example, the hexagon, the cube is either a square or a hexagon or an octahedron. I mean, an 8-sided. Anything that's 4, 6, or 8 are associated with a cube. If you look at life forms that are on Earth, that are on land, if you go into water, which is female, you go into the oceans, you'll find an overwhelming number of them are based on 5. Like the starfish, for example, and the sand dollar, and you can go on and on and on and on and on. A lot of this 5-ness. Now, there's going to be exceptions on both sides. Like there's going to be the what do you call it? The octopus, for example, has 8. But if you list them all, and if you see them, you'll see this huge amount as 5-ness on here and 6-ness on the land, showing you can see where the water aspect pulls things more that are female and more on the 5-sided. So it's like you start working this, and it's more like an intuitive thing to come up with this. And then when you look at the brain functions, and you start looking at the logical patterns of the male, they keep coming up being 3-sided and 4-sided, and the female side is 3-sided and 5-sided.
But isn't all the males inside the females there also?
What? All the males inside the female?
Aren't they contained in all those female?
Each one of these contains the others in various ways.
Okay.
It's in a circle around the outside.
Oh, the female contains them all, yeah. The female contains all the male. But the male also contains all the other ones, too. There's one male form that does. There's 2 forms there that are very special. The sphere is the mommy, and the cube is the daddy. It's the big daddy, and the sphere is the big mama. And the mama will contain all of the 5 female shapes, but the cube will also contain all the other 4 males, including the mommy. None of the other ones will do that, but this one will. And by that, in a very special way, you can take a sphere, symmetrically you can put them in a cube. You can take a sphere and slide it right in there, and it would symmetrically touch perfectly. And then you can take the this one, and it will fit in like that. If you made the size just right, it will just slide right in. One of the tetrahedron edges become the diagonals across the cube. And that's another one of the keys, by the way, is the diagonals. The diagonals, as you'll see as this unfolds, is almost always where the hinge is. It's where the secret of anything you're trying to find will usually be found along the diagonals. And so the tetrahedron and the sphere will fit in there. The octahedron is easy because you just connect the centers of it, and that will slide right in there perfectly if you get the size just right. These two female forms, though, it doesn't look like they would ever go in there symmetrically until you notice something about them. And that is, if you put them just like this, so that they're a hexagonal view, you have an edge in the front and another edge exactly the same in the back. And then you have a symmetrical edge along this side and this side, and another symmetrical edge along the top and the bottom. So you can take this and just go right inside of a cube, and this little edge will fit right in the center of each face, symmetrically and perfectly. And you can do the same thing with this one. You got to turn it just right to like this. Now there's an edge across the front, and there's another edge exactly the same across the back. There's a left, and there's a right, and there's a top, and there's a bottom, and it'll just slide right in there. And so the cube, by its very nature, contains the proportions of all the other ones, including the sphere. And so the cube and the sphere are the two most important of these shapes. This is why, for anyone who has studied Walter Russell, anybody know about Walter Russell? Walter Russell's work, the reason it worked, he didn't know anything about sacred geometry. If he had he would have leaped in consciousness. He didn't know it existed, or he would have been super brilliant. He's already super brilliant, but he would have really been out there if he'd have known about this. But he picked the two right shapes. He picked the cube and the sphere to be the basis of his philosophy. And because he did, he was able to do a great deal of things that could have chosen other shapes and he would have been incorrect. And just even in the Bible says that the throne of God is so many cubits this way and so many cubits this way, etc. And when you make one, it's a cube. And the chair that all the Egyptians sat on, have you ever noticed it? It's a cube with a little back on it. The cube is a really, really, really important male form. It's probably the most male form that there is, whereas the sphere is the most female form that there is.
For the purpose of raising one's level of consciousness or ascending or whatever, what would be the most ideal structure to have, to live in?
To sit in?
To live in. Like if you could build your own house any shape you wanted.
All kinds of people trying to study that right now, and I really don't know. I don't think that's going to really matter that much. Relative to the, once you get the Merkaba going and that aspect of your fields going, it won't matter what the shape of the building you're in. It won't matter anything, nothing, no outside influence can influence what's internally inside the Merkaba. And but there is, if you want to look at Opera Mills' work, which I'll give you, he makes this shape for people to get into, a big one that you can climb into, and has reflective things which are incredible. It really is amazing when you're inside of these things. Yeah, because what it does, how they reflect energy back. And my thought was to do a lot of Wilhelm Reich's work with the doorbusters, and you know what that is, and he's created mirrors for life energy that reflect prana using steel wool and cotton in certain thicknesses, and it reflects it just like a mirror. And you can make these blankets. Of course, they're illegal in the United States. Yeah, because they don't work. But if they don't work, then who cares? Whatever they. But they do work, because if you lay in one of these things, you can only stay under there about 30 seconds. You go screaming out from underneath them because they're so powerful. He used to make these rooms that looked like outhouses, because he didn't know anything about shape. Made out of these walls that were steel wool and cotton, and steel wool and cotton, and certain things. And you go in there, and it reflects all your life energy back at you. You can't stay in one of those rooms more than about 15 minutes. I mean, you'll kick the door down to get out of there. It's healing to a point, but if it gets too much, it will actually make you sick. If you get too much, it's just like you get OD'd on it. But they could make those, I've always wanted to make one of those things like this, where it really reflected it, not only did it mirrored it, but reflected it and focused it. You could put it right into a certain chakra, and you'd probably stay in there for like 2 seconds and jump out or something. But I've never done that kind of stuff. There's a lot of real fun experimentation that you could do on this, and then the effects that these have on consciousness. They do affect you dramatically. You can just sit in them and feel the differences. You can also look at the work of, say, Greg Hogue, who Metaforms, who makes all kinds of pyramidal structures and things that you can sit in and experiment with that. For example, if you sit inside of a pyramid where you got a 51 degree, 51 second, 51 degrees, 51 minutes, 24 second degree angle, it's the angle of the Great Pyramid, and if you sit in there and you align it properly and you go to sleep, your first couple nights might be a little strange, but after that, you'll find that you get about 3 or 4 hours. Has anybody ever done this? Yeah. Well, you probably found the same. I'll just tell you what I found. You can tell me if you found the same thing. I found 3 to maybe 4 hours of sleep, and you wake up, and that's it, baby. You don't need any more. And what did you find? Huh?
I just wanted the dimensions again.
Of what?
Of the pyramid.
It's just the Great Pyramid. You can get that anywhere. It's the angle, 51 degrees, 51 minutes, 24 seconds. And it focuses your... a pyramid reflects a sphere perfectly if the angle is right. And so it reflects your life force energy right back at you, and you just regenerate very quickly. This is an X-ray pattern of a beryl, I think it's a beryl, yeah, it's a beryl crystal. It's an X-ray diffraction pattern. And it is one of the closest means of actually seeing into crystals to see how their atoms are arranged and physically looking in there and looking at them. I just wanted to show you this one and notice how the atoms are arranged, and you can actually see the flower of life pattern in there. You see it? So why do atoms just happen to arrange in these sacred patterns? This is one of a salt crystal here. It's another diffraction pattern. And if you notice, a salt crystal is a cube, and you see the cubical nature of these patterns in there. Now, these are atoms. Each one of these little black spots is an atom. And if you notice, the atoms are spheres. Now, what we've really got here is this little speck of nothingness. If this was an atom this big, you got a little tiny speck you can hardly see with these electrons that are probably somewhere around them. The electrons are moving around the central core at 9/10 the speed of light. The speed of light is 186,200 miles a second. That's miles a second. And this is a speck you can hardly see, and these little electrons are moving around in 1 second. That little electron has gone around that point that you can't even see, something like 160,000 miles. It's inconceivable. I mean, I used to sit there in physics going, nah, they're pulling my leg, thinking, nah. And so they're moving so fast as they move around that you can't see them, but they form what's called an electron cloud, or a sphere. It's a spherical cloud on the outer shell. And so all of your atoms that form all of the fabric of the nature are little spheres. It goes right past us. And so the whole fabric is made out of spheres. There's spheres all over the place. Light, all the light waves moving through space are all spheres. We normally think of a light wave doing this kind of thing, right? A little thing going through it like that. But you don't have this little thing going down there through through, across space. If you took, say, a light inside this cube and flashed it, and these were flashed in all directions, well, you don't have a cubical pattern of light moving off from there, even though you look down and you see a cube. If you looked back from it a few thousand miles back, you'd see a cube, but the pattern that's going off there isn't cubical, because a light wave that leaves the center of this surface going straight up in 1 second is 186,200 miles away. This one is also the one that's going off the point of the edge is 186,200 miles away. And when you think about how far that is, and the distances between those two beams are almost identical, the only difference is this little tiny bit of difference. You couldn't see the difference. In 1 second, you have a near perfect sphere of light leaving that cube. In 2 seconds, that little tiny difference, which always is always there, approaches zero very, very quickly. It never actually reaches it, but so you have these waves of light expanding off of objects that are spheres. And so all your light waves out there are all these just interacting spheres of light waves. Even if you have really big things, then it just means that it takes longer for them to become spheres. That's all it is. So you've got this sphericalness all over the place, both at cosmic levels, microcosmic levels. The atoms are all different sizes of spheres depending on how many electron shells they go out from and what their internal structure is. And depending on whether or not they have all of their outer electrons or don't, and by what, they're going to either have a positive or a negative charge on their outer electron shell, and that is the primary basis of chemistry. What things will join and will not join together, though there are other factors. Size has a big factor in all of it. And all of those things, again, are little spheres. They join together in patterns that look, these are the basic ones, the linear one, of 2 big ones and a little one in the middle, which is a straight line, or 3 big ones and a little one in the middle, which is a triangle, or in a tetrahedron, or in an octahedron, or in a cube, and they now know about the other 2, the icosahedron and dodecahedral patterns, which are the rest of the possibilities. And everything, all other possibilities come out of that, which I'll be able to show you in just a moment. And then, so you get say 8 little atoms that come and form a cube, and who knows why, but they form this perfect cube. And then you get 4 more that come over here and link with these 4 and form these 3-dimensional structures that are called lattices. And so you have a cube connected to a cube, connected to a cube, etc., like this. And these are the lattice structures that form crystalline structures in metals, and these kinds of things that exist throughout nature. Again, no one knows why they form these particular patterns. All they know is they do. Sometimes they get very complex and forming all kinds of geometrical shapes inside of there. But if you were to carefully look at the way the atoms formed in geometrical shapes, you would find that you would be able to trace them back to one of these 5 shapes, no matter what the crystalline lattice structure is. Does not make any difference. I don't care what it is. You could still always trace it back to one of the 5 shapes, which I'll try to show you in a moment. First of all, since we're talking about crystals, there are a lot of crystals out there. Who's ever been to the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show? Okay, all those people, just raise their hand. You can ask them and they'll tell you. There are definitely a lot of crystals in the world. There's so many you can't believe it. And they're finding new ones all the time. Ones they've never seen ever before, with new atomic structures they never knew existed. Every year they find new ones. And they're, I really don't know how many there are. Does anybody have any idea? I have to guess, I'd say 250,000 different kinds of crystals. I did just that they know of. I'm just guessing at that. I really don't know. There's so many. And the Tucson General Mineral Show has about 8 or 10 hotels with some of them, all the floor structures and every single room in them filled with nothing but crystals. And then you can go into these big auditoriums with nothing but crystals all over there. And it's truly amazing. And it's just, life is every single mathematical possibility. Life has tried it and created a different crystal to form it. Well, all of them will be arranged into 6 categories. There are 6 primary categories that no matter what the crystal you grab a hold of will fit into one of these 6 categories. And those 6 categories are called isometric, tetragonal, hexagonal, orthorhombic, monoclinic, and triclinic. They're all functions of a cube. And it just says, right, this is straight out of a mineralogy book. You can go up here and it says, by distorting, the starting point for all crystal pattern systems is the cube, and by distorting the cell, other cells can be derived. The isometric system is a cube. Tetragonal cube system is a cube with a little piece on top. The hexagonal system is just a cube looking at it from that view, which is a hexagon. And the orthorhombics and the monoclinic and triclinic systems are cubes where you simply change the angle in them. And so there are certain angles that are distorted. And so you've got these, all the basic systems are a function of a cube, another one of the sacred shapes. Now this is where it starts getting a little interesting. This is a fluorite crystal. It's in the shape of an octahedron. Can everybody see it? It's in the same shape as this. It didn't, approximate. It's not perfect like this. It's approximate. It didn't grow, it didn't get cut this way, it grew this way. And actually, to be a little more precise, the matrix of the atoms are in the form of an octahedron. And it comes in these sheets, and whenever you strike it, it breaks into these patterns. So, and I would never do this, but if I was to drop this on the concrete, it would break up into a whole bunch of little tiny octahedrons. This is also fluorite, only it's in a whole bunch of cubes. In mineralogy books, they try to describe this by showing this flat pattern. But down here below, can you all see these? There's something in crystallology that's called truncating. You can truncate a structure to create a different crystal. That simply means you can either cut off an edge and you do it equally all the way around, or you cut off the corners equally all the way around, or you cut off the faces equally all the way around. And that's called truncating. And there's lots of ways that can be done. Well, in this case of a cube, you would truncate the corners. So you cut each of the corners off equally. If you keep doing it, first you cut them off equally all the way around, and you get this structure. And then you keep doing that equally all the way around, you'll come up with this structure, and then you just keep right on doing that, you'll come up with an octahedron. Or the other way around, if you take an octahedron and cut off the tips of it, like you cut off each one of these tips, and you just keep doing that, it will turn back into this one, and then into this one, and then into a cube. It'll go either way. You can start with this one and get this one, or you can start with this one and get this one. And we know that these are duals of each other, so it kind of makes sense anyway. But this is one way of showing it, and that's one way that the textbooks try to describe how these two crystals can do this. It's a It's not saying that that's how it does it. It's just saying that that's a logical way to explain how in the heck the atoms change from cubical to octahedral and back again, doing this. This is a real big piece of fluorite. It's about this big around. You don't find them that big anymore. I mean, they're real, real, real rare. And somebody left it on a ledge in the sunlight. And the bonds that hold the atoms together are so weak that the sunlight, the excitation of the sunlight, cracked this thing. And if you notice where it cracks exactly along the octahedral lines. Right. Up in this corner is a cube. And if you truncate the edges, you cut off the edges all the way around, it moves to this structure, and you keep doing it times to this one, and the thing turns into a dodecahedron. This becomes this just by cutting the edges off of a cube. Now, this is pyrite. It grew into a cube. It's a little bit longer axis. It's not a perfect cube. The one end grew a little bit bigger than the other one. But this grew this way. If you look carefully, it looks like somebody cut it and polished it. Nobody touched it. They just took it straight out of the earth. And it came that way. And this one is a perfect dodecahedron. It's just like this, only little. And you'll have to come up and see these later. But it looks like somebody cut this and shaped it, because it is exactly like this, only it's pyrite. It grew this way. Nobody touched it. It grew into this little dodecahedron. Pyrite does exactly the same thing. If you give pyrite enough time, it will grow into cubical. Give it enough time again, it'll grow back into dodecahedral. The same living structure will keep changing shape. It'll oscillate over long periods of time between these two different structures. Well, the dodecahedron, if you come down here and you cut off the points of the dodecahedron, it immediately goes from this to this, just by truncating that. Now, each one of these is a different category of crystals. There's a whole spectrum of crystals. I'll show you in just a moment here out of this book. And if you keep truncating the dodecahedron, it not only turns into a nicosahedron. If you keep doing it, the thing will turn into an octahedron. It'll go into one of these. And then if you take one of these and cut off the tip, it turns into this one, which is a real interesting one. This is the shape right here. This is called a cube octahedron, because the angles of this, it was originally a cube that's been truncated this way, and the angles of it form an octahedron, which you can see that it came from. It's in between the cube and the octahedron, actually. It's one view of it is a square with a diamond, running like this. This was considered the most sacred shape in existence by Buckminster Fuller. He felt this was the key to everything. And he had a real good reason why he came up with this. He gave it his own name. He called it a cube equilibrium. And the reason is because this is one of them right here. Put it like that. Is that it has a unique property that no other shape known has. And that is that it can, by rotational aspects of the bonds, can become all five of the platonic solids. And to show you, for example, it's already a cube in its basic structure, but by rotating this, it comes down and becomes an octahedron. You see? Can everybody see what it is? If you rotate them this way, it will become a tetrahedron. Of course, I can't line all these bonds up perfectly, but because of this is a physical structure. So you've got the cube already, the octahedron, the tetrahedron. The icosahedron has to be rotated, so looking at this green square in the front, if you rotate it so that the green square forms two equilateral triangles, and you do that all the way around, for the blue one, the green one, the orange one, the red one, all the way around, you have to do it perfectly. But just look at the green square. So there's two equilateral triangles in there. Then that one is an icosahedron. And if you can make the bonds go out the other way, which you can't do with this structure, you got to do it on a computer or something, then it will form a dodecahedron. It contains within it all 5 of the shapes by rotational patterns. And so he felt that there was something real special about that one, and derived much of his philosophy from this one shape. There's another man named Gerald Langham. It's D as in Gerald, like with a D, Gerald. And Gerald Langham's work was given the name Genesis. And he was a brilliant person who he did a lot of amazing work in botany. He saved South America during World War II by creating a corn that was like a weed. You just threw it out and it just grew. And they were all starving to death, and he saved them, really saved lots of lives. He was studying the sesame seed, and he went in the sesame seed and then deeper and deeper and deeper, and he got in the middle of the sesame seed and he found this little cube right in the center of it. And what that little cube doing down in there? And it's kind of the open sesame seed. It opened his life in long ways. He realized that the cube was the key to seeds. And we're only talking about a few things, but you can go into viruses, for example, are all geometrical packages. Diatomaceous earth, which is the original life patterns on the earth, are all geometrical structures. You can go on and on and on. We're only talking about crystals here and a few other things, but you can carry this through to seeds or all kinds of other areas of life too. And he found that the cube was in there, and then he found these 13 rays that came out of this cube that structured the seed. And then he just took off on that and found out that the same pattern was around the human body. He says, wow, we're just a big seed too. And he then started getting very philosophical and went to metaphysical school and graduated with a PhD in metaphysics in LA. And wrote a thesis that I read, which was really, really good. And since then he created this thing called Genesis and has thousands of people that follow him. He's one of the people I think are really great because he took the knowledge that he had learned about the grids around the body, and he showed a way that you could use it. Not just information, but he showed a way to apply it. And he did that through dance, through sacred movements of the body. And so he has you move in this particular way, kind of like Tai Chi, where you're moving through and touching the various grid fields and becoming aware of them. And it's very powerful. There's a lot of people who have been deeply influenced by this work. Gerald Langham. He just died. He was in Arizona. But if you're interested in that, this paper I'm going to be giving out has Human Dimensions Institute at North Carolina's phone number on it. And they have one of the teachers there, so she knows all of that work and where you could go to get that work. But so there is this grid also around the human body. And both him and Ann Buckminster Fuller were more concerned with this grid that was around the body than the star tetrahedral field, which is what we're going to be using. If you keep going, it turns into a cube, and then from a cube you can truncate again through these patterns over to this one, which is called a rhombic dodecahedron. That happens to be the dual of the cube equilibrium. Those two are together. There's first the 5, which is like the pentatonic scale, and then there's 2 more that are added, which is the 7 notes of the octave. And then there's another 5 polyhedron that are coming after that, which makes a set of 12, which corresponds with the 12 notes of the chromatic scale. There's actually shape associated with all of these things, but we got to tie this down a lot stronger before we can even begin to talk about that. Anyway, as you keep moving through here, you'll see how each one of these shapes keeps coming back through one of the 5 platonic solids, always. And no matter, each one of these, by the way, is a different set of crystals. This is a crystal book. It's called Rocks and Minerals, and I'll leave it up here and you can look at it. And for example, over on this side of the page over here, it will show the atomic structure. In this case, it's dodecahedral. And these are all the crystals in here, different kinds of crystals that are dodecahedral. All of these up here are tetrahedral, and these down here are cubical. These are all cubical crystals over here. Some of these are unusual shapes that when you first see them, until you truncate them back and find out what the platonic solid is that is hidden behind them. These are all rhombic dodecahedral crystals, and these are all octahedral crystals down here, showing the patterns up here. These are all truncated octahedral crystals. These are hexagonal crystals, which are a function of the cube. These are hexagonal crystals also. These are truncated cubical crystals where just the tips are cut off up over here. And each time you change the internal structure or the way the atoms arrange themselves, you get a physical crystal that looks entirely different. Totally different, has different third-dimensional worlds, third-dimensional attributes. So I think you can get a pretty good idea here. What I'm saying is that you have, and this is only some, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of these things. But no matter which crystal you get, you find out what is crystal and atomic structure, how the atoms are lined up, and you'll find that you can truncate it and come up to with one of the 5 platonic solids, showing clearly that the 5 platonic solids is the underlying key underneath all of your crystalline structures. And all of those 5 platonic solids came out of one of the informational systems out of the fruit of life, which came out of the flower of life. These are the kind of polyhedron that I'm talking about, each one being having a different quality, and your atoms arranging specifically to them. These are the external angles that you see on the crystals will always reflect the internal angles of the atomic atoms. This is also a crystal. It's a water crystal called a snowflake. And it's based upon hexagonal patterns of crystals. No two supposedly have ever been the same. And they're directly out of flower of life manifestation. This is a periodic table of the elements. The elements are all the elemental atoms, different kinds of atoms that create the molecules that make the fabric of the reality. There is 2 atoms on this chart. They're both special. There's one atom on this chart that we will all recognize as being real special to us, and that's carbon, because that's the basis of organic chemistry, of all life that we know, what we call life. But there's another atom on this chart that demonstrates on a chemical level the functions of life absolutely equally, just as well as carbon. And it's the one that's 1 octave below it. This is carbon. There's a fold in this page here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In the same grouping directly below it is silicon, which is what almost all of your crystals are made out of in on Earth. Carbon and silicon demonstrate to the chemist equally the principles of life from a chemical level. Now, by that, what I mean is carbon will make all these incredible different bonds and shapes and forms and just this vast array of different chemical possibilities, and it'll link with just about anything it comes in contact with. So will silicon. Exactly the same. It will make these chains and these links and all these various things on and on and on, and it will link with just about anything that comes near it. It will bond with just about anything. And so chemists for a long time figured that maybe there were silicon life forms on Earth, but they never ever found any. And so they'd only found carbon-based life forms, where spirit had only entered into carbon-based bodies. And so then science fiction movies, taking up on this theme, began in the 1950s, made several movies about the possibility of silicon life forms on other planets, because it appeared, though, that was possible to do, so they dreamed up these things. Those guys who made those movies never dreamed or realized that there were silicon life forms on Earth at the time that they did it. And it hasn't been until just recently that we have gone down deep miles into the crevices of the oceans, way down deep. And we found that there are life forms down there that are alive and living and have no carbon atoms in them at all. They're totally silicon. There are sponges down in there. They're silicon sponges. They're completely alive. You'll see them in a picture that's going to come up here real soon. Am I going to do that? I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. But anyway, we have them right here, right on Earth. They really do exist. On the other hand, we have crystals right here, right now, and we look at these guys, and we say, nah, they're not alive, they're hard, they're not soft like we are, and they don't breathe. So we set these criteria up to correspond with us, and we don't think of them as being alive, but they are. And they're ancient beings, and they've been in one body. We think Thoth has been in a body for 52,000 years, and we go, wow, that's a long time. Well, this one's been there for maybe 500,000 years. Same body. You know, a lot of crystals go back for 1.5 million years in the same body. And spirit is in there. And what's happening on Earth right now? Our relationship with silicon is so powerful. We're not aware. The Earth that we live on is a round ball. It's a silicon ball. The crust of the Earth, which is 30 to 50 miles deep, is made up of 25% silicon, and it reacts with anything that comes near. And that crust, though we pick up Earth and we look at it in dirt that we don't see, but when you get down there just a tiny bit, the entire crust, which is 30 to 50 miles deep, is made up of 87% silicon crystal. It's almost 90%. Live on silicon. And so we don't think of them, we don't realize how closely we are linked with them. And we are almost unconsciously making a marriage with them right now. We're not even really thinking about it that much. Our computers are all made out of, they run on silicon. They run on one of the other life forms of the planet that is alive from my point of view, and conscious, and aware, and has feelings, and everything else, and thinks, and can add and subtract really fast. And they like people a whole lot. And we're creating instruments that are filled with their essence, but based upon our level of consciousness. We're creating instruments where you have to plug in a binary sequence that goes on a phonograph record to get to the memory, which is based on the way we think. There's other ways that could be done. And if you were to just take that computer with just a little bit of changes, that computer would be alive. It would be self-aware, and you wouldn't have to do a lot of the things that you're doing right now. We will come to that because it happens in other planets. Eventually, the silicon and the carbon of a planet link across. And when that happens, the planet has two eyes. It opens up and it has two viewpoints, and the communication happens. We'll eventually get there soon, very soon. I believe 1 more year, 2 more years, definitely by the end of the century, we'll have self-aware computers that will change history forever. We'll never be the same again. And especially when you see what we're going to explain something about them in a little bit. And however, once we see the possibilities of what will be capable through a self-aware silicon computer, it does not take very much longer to realize that we have the same crystalline structure around us, and the same capabilities and possibilities are within us without the computer. We can do anything a computer can do. We can add and subtract at those speeds. We can do anything the computer can do without the computer. They're just showing us the possibilities of life. They're a lot older life form than we are. They've been around a lot longer. It's real easy to see how those 5 shapes are connected through crystalline structure. It's just because they are so obviously related to it. But when you look at an organic structure like this fetus of this baby, or yourself in a mirror, or a tree, or a bug, or something like this, and I say to you, the same 5 structures are creating those shapes, and just as much as in the crystalline structures. I mean, it just doesn't look like it. You don't see any geometry in there. Organic chemistry tends to be soft and curvy and doesn't have any straight lines and all this kind of stuff. We don't see where any of this is, so it just doesn't seem like it's possible. And until you look very, very carefully, because hidden in organic chemistry is all these very things that we just saw in crystals. In order to do that, we're going to begin to look at conception. We're going to start at the very, very beginning of human life and work our way out from there. And in conception, the conceptual process that I'm about to show, though we're going to be talking about it in terms of humans, will apply to all life forms known. That's A-L-L, underlined. All in the entire spectrum of life on this planet that we know of, they'll all move through these same exact steps in the same exact way, though we will be talking about humans. So we'll begin with the process begins with a sphere, the first sacred form. The ovum is a round ball. It's a really round ball. It's not kind of round or sort of round. It's perfectly round. It looks like the moon, if you could see. It's you take a chicken egg, I always say that when you hard boil it. You take the yolk out of the middle. Have you ever done that and you look at it? It's really round. It holds, that's the most female form there is. And so the female chose that shape. If it was a male that had the womb, it would probably be a cube. So this is a sea urchin ovum with a little sea urchin sperm on there. At least I hope so. And so it begins as a sphere. Now, the membrane of the ovum. It's called the zona pellucida. Remember the word zona pellucida because I'm going to refer to it a whole bunch of times, which is just the membrane of the first cell. And inside the zona pellucida, there are these 2 little bodies that are called polar bodies, and they're embedded inside the membrane. And then in here is a liquid And inside that liquid is another sphere, which is called the female pronucleus. And it contains 22 plus 1 chromosomes. They always say plus 1 because the other one is the one that determines sex. It's really just say 23 chromosomes. The process that I'm going to describe, mitosis, is what that's called, cell division, is going to begin, if this was the ovum here, this little sphere, the cell divisions, the cells that are going to divide are going to get littler and littler and littler inside of it, but the outer surface of the zona pellucida is going to remain fixed. It doesn't change size. Okay, that's kind of an important part of this, which you'll see later. And the ovum, which you can actually see with the naked eye, it's 200 times bigger than the average cell in the body. You can see it without a microscope. It's the only one you can. It's this huge single cell that, again, the division will get smaller and smaller and smaller inside it until it reaches 512 cells, at which point the average size of the human cell will have been reached. And so the process first goes within itself to figure out how it's done, and then it turns around and expands beyond itself. This is even in the geometry. Here's the ovum saturated with a sperm. Now you probably read in your books that it takes one sperm to conceive a baby. And now they've known actually for some time now with the use of electron microscopes that that's not true. That was only a partial truth. The whole truth is that it takes 10, 11, or 12 sperm that join around the 11th, 12th, or 13th sperm, which forms some kind of energy package that allow that one single sperm to go in. The single sperm cannot go through there by itself. It needs these other 10 or 11 or 12 guys to be able to get them through. So anyway, it definitely, though, does take 10, 11, or 12 sperm to allow this one to go in. And he enters in and begins swimming toward the pronucleus. The next thing that happens is the tail breaks off of that little head and just disappears. Just goes away. And the little tiny head expands out very quickly and becomes a perfect sphere, exactly the same size as the female pronucleus. This exactly the same size is very important, I believe, judging by what I know about the geometries, because the next motion is that they merge through each other and form the Vesica Pisces, the image of the first day of Genesis. So at this moment, they contain all the knowledge of the universe between them by their very geometries. And they can't form that perfect image unless the male is identical to her. And I have a belief here, though there's no scientific basis on it. Just as each person in this room would penetrate into the darkness a certain distance, so our natural ability is that we have a different size sphere around each one of us, I think each one of these sperm also has a different size sphere around them that she can sense. And I don't think that she's going to allow any of these guys in here unless they have the perfect size, unless the resonance of that sphere is identical to hers. And for this reason, I think that there could be a male and a female that could try all they want and never have a baby. Because if their spherical sizes of their natures are too different, they won't correspond. Because it's so obvious to me from this fact here that this must take place. Then, on the very next step that happens after that, they merge right through each other and they become a single cell, and they contain the 46 chromosomes of life. This is called the human zygote, and it's the first cell of the human body. There it is. That's a mouse, so it doesn't look like one, does it? But there's it's starting to go to number 2 there. There's the fertilized egg of a mouse. That's an electron microscope view of one. The next thing that happens is the two little polar bodies migrate and they find a place that is north-south, which I believe lines up with mommy-daddy. and with mommy rather. They tune to her field. And from the north, and I believe it's from the north, a tube runs down to the south and just sort of appears out of nowhere very quickly. It's a little thread. It's actually, I don't show it here, but it's attached at the top and the bottom, the tube right down the center. And then the chromosomes of the first cell break in half and line up along that tube, half on one side and half on the other. And what you have here right now is, as you see the electromagnetic fields of your own body later, you're going to see that this is really an abstract view of you when you're an adult. You're going to see that you have a north and a south pole. You're going to realize you have a tube down the middle, that you have a sphere of energy around that, and that half of you is on one side and half of you is on the other side. It's really very close to what the ultimate end will be, though the actual dimensions of your body are also about to be contained in here. The actual precise dimensions of the adult human. It takes a couple more steps here before that takes place. So the next thing that happens is you then go from 1 cells to 2, and there's the mouse egg again showing that they've taken off the zona pellucida, so you have the 2 cells there like that. Now, in most of it goes from 2 to 4. Most of your books, it shows this. They didn't really know for a long time what happened, so they usually just put them in a square or something like that. They didn't know what shape it took, but now they do know. And the shape is that it forms a tetrahedron, when the 4 cells line up on the 4 points of this tetrahedron, and lined up with the north-south. It could be the other way around, too. So you got 3 of them up here and 1 down here. Now, to show you that using geometry, this would be the zona pellucida here, the inner surface of it, and these are the 4 cells lining up like that, which is the tightest compact way that you can get 4 cells into a sphere. And this would be a top view if you were looking down from below. It'd be like putting 3 and 1 more stacked in the middle. So that if you connected the centers together, you get a tetrahedron. And this is an actual view of a tetrahedral mouse egg. Here's your first cell, your second, your third, and this back here over here is the 4th one. If you went, don't look at this one here. You went across here, you'd get a triangle, and then if you ran those triangles over to this other one that's back over here, the bigger one, you would get a tetrahedron. This is beginning to go to the next step. It's real hard for them to get, this thing is going so fast, that it's very hard for them to get it exactly at the proper stage. So now you have you, you exist as a tetrahedron. And the next thing that happens, it goes from 4 to 8. And what it does is it forms another tetrahedron facing the other way and forms a star tetrahedron, like this. So that the 8 cells are on there, which looks like this. It forms the egg of life, the second sacred form that came out of the second rotation of Genesis. This is what you would see. This particular level of life, according to the angels, is one of the most important stages of development of organic chemistry, or of human beings or anything else. Every life form passes through this stage. Flies, everything else, even mosquitoes. They all go through it. And they all end up looking like these 8 little spheres. And what science knows about this is that they can't, first of all, they can't tell any difference between these spheres. They appear to be absolutely identical. it would be like 8 identical twins in the room. They can't see any differences at all. They can't detect any differences at all. And though usually you can tell a difference between one cell and another, they can't on this one at all, not at this level. And they found that they can sever the bonds of this right between these two and get 2 of these like that and make 2 identical beings. Or they can sever the bonds this way and make 4 identical beings. I don't know. In the works that I've read, I haven't seen them do this yet, but theoretically they could sever this into 8 different ways and make 8. Well, I don't know anybody that's done that. And what the angels say is that these 8 cells, first of all, are immortal relative to your body. They remain with your body as long as your body is alive, unless something terrible happens to that part of your body and they get blown away. I don't know what that really means spiritually. But they will remain in your body. Most of the cells in your body will be regenerated. They die and new ones are formed every 5 to 7 years. So every 5 to 7 years, depending on what your cycle is, you completely replace your body with a brand new body. But these cells stay there from day one all the way to the end. They never die. That's not science saying that. Science doesn't even know where they're located. And the angels also say that the precise location of them is down near the base of the spine. And that it's straight underneath the perineum, going up from there, and a short distance up from underneath and there, up inside of there. It's where they're located. Which happens to be the geometrical center of your body. If you were to measure your body from that point at the base of your spine to the top of your head, and then from that base down to the bottom of your feet, same distance. It's exactly the same. That is, if you take 100 people and measure them, you might be a little longer and you might have short legs or something like that. And they said that this is closer to who you really are, though it may seem kind of funny, really more who you really are. It's 8 spheres. At one point I'm going to talk about Egyptian Tantra. We have 8 aspects to ourselves. That's the reason why there's 8 electrical circuits moving through our body. There's 8 totally different aspects to ourselves. And we have 8 different, completely, totally different lives associated with ourselves, according to Egyptian Tantra. At the right time I will talk about this more. We need to lay out more before I can really get into that. But their concepts of Tantra and life and everything is far more expanded than Hindu or Tibetan or Taoist or any of these other ways. So anyway, this is one of the stages of it, and it's the egg of life, the first pattern that we're talking about. We're going to come back to it and talk about it many, many, many times more again. It then goes from 8 to 16. And this is the view of those 8 cells from, this is one edge of it, this is a hexagonal aerial view of those 8 cells packed in there. This is the electron microscope view of that. It's starting to twist a little bit. This one doesn't count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, 8. They would form a cube in there. That's the other thing is the start, this thing is the same as this thing. Everybody sees that, don't you? Which is a cube also. So they go from tetrahedral to star tetrahedral to cubical. And then at that point it goes to 8, and this little guy forms one out on the edge of each one. Let me see if there's, I didn't put it in there. But it first goes out one on the out. It first becomes a cube within a cube. One goes out here on the other edge, just like that comes out of Metatron's cube. The cube that comes out as a cube within a cube, and it forms a cube within a cube. And then that's the last time it gets symmetrical. Because if you make one of those models, which I've done, you first you go to 8, then you go to 16. Then you take 16 more and you put them in symmetrically. only there's 2 places left over. No matter how you do it, there's 2 empty spots. And so when you go to 32, and you take 32 and you fill in those 2 spots and you try to make it symmetrical, it just starts going funny. And that's exactly what happens in life. You know what I mean? The little perfect cube forms a cube within a cube, and then it starts doing this funny thing, and it starts becoming a blob. And the blob starts growing in such a way that it becomes hollow and turns into a sphere, a hollow sphere. And then at the North and the South Pole, led by probably the 8 cells, is what I suspect, a tube begins to drop down through the middle and go down and connect to the south one like this. This is an actual electron microscope of it. This is the hollow ball. At this point, there's 512 cells in here, and and it's a torus, by the way, too. The north crown becomes this, and this toroidal pattern forms down through the center, and forms this structure through the middle, and you have a structure that is identical to an apple. It looks just like one, only it's hollow in the middle. Can you see this core running through here? They've ripped this apart so you can see inside of there. And what then happens is that this opening here becomes your mouth, the other end becomes your anus. This end, inside of this core becomes your internal structure where your organs are. These become your lung structures in here, where this is, and this is the last time that we have everything in common. In other words, every life form goes from, just to recap this, every life form goes from a sphere to a tetrahedron, to a star tetrahedron, to a cube made in the form of this one here. Then from a cube, it turns back into a sphere again, and then becomes a torus, and the shape of the apple. All of these are all these sacred shapes that we saw out of the Metatron's cube. And every living form known, that becomes the apple, and then from the apple, then it depends. If it's a fly, little wings come out, or if it's a dog, a little tail starts wagging. You know? Or if it's a horse, it wants to gallop. Or if it's a person, we sort of stand there and wait for it to happen. But we all have this in common. That's why I really do. I think the Bible said that the tree, the fruit tree that we bit of in the Bible, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that got us into this place in the first place, was an apple tree. And the symbology is so deeply involved in here that these were the writing of the Bible, and a lot of these sacred documents were done by people on real high levels that knew how to talk on a lot of other levels than just one. And like the Bible, for example, what Stan Tenten has found, not only is the Bible have a story going through it, but he's found that every single letter in the Bible has deep mathematical significance, showing all the laws of the universe, how the universe was created. The very first line of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and he can show you this, describes in detail the Great Pyramid. Mathematically describes it in detail. The first thing, lays it all out in Hebrew. And so we're just not to the place yet where we're quite able to function in those kinds of levels, where you can read a book at about 100 different levels. The Emerald Tablets were written on 100 different levels. And you can read that from 100 different levels of consciousness and read something totally different into it, depending on who you are and at the time that you're reading it. So, you now begin to get the feel about how the geometry is a function inside of yourself as well as the crystal patterns and these kinds of things. This is only one of the informational systems that we're going to be talking with. What I just showed was the internal structure, the beginning of life forms. And you can see how this geometry is used. But we're now going to jump out to the outer edge of the life form. We're going to look at the electromagnetic fields that are around the body, seeing how they correspond with these inner conceptual fields inside of there. So that you can see that these same shapes are around your body as well as in your body. And from there, it leads into some real interesting areas that we can begin to discuss. This is just a matter of record. Tchaikovsky, he had already been involved in underwater birth for a long time. They've been doing that for, I don't know how many, he had probably done at least, if I have to guess, maybe 20,000 births that were underwater. His daughter was in the 20s, I think, when this took place. It wasn't a real long time ago. And they had taken a woman to the Black Sea to give an underwater birth in the ocean. And they were sitting there all prepared for it, and the humans were all there, and she was kind of off the shore, hanging out in the water to give birth to this baby. And I believe it was these 3 dolphins came up, and they just pushed everybody away, and they just took over. And the dolphins come up when they do this, and they just do something to the whole system. And she gave birth to this baby with almost no pain or anything. It was a real phenomenal experience. And that began not just underwater birthing, but having dolphin midwives as birthing. Now people are actually doing this now, and there's something about the sonar that the dolphins do at the time of birth. And the dolphins go nuts. I mean, when they see, first of all, they love children. If you go swimming with dolphins, if there's kids around, they'll all go to the kids. If there's no kids, they'll go to the women. If there's no women, they'll go to the men. And if there's a woman that's pregnant, forget it. She gets total attention. And, that little baby's the greatest thing of all. And so they just go bananas when they see a human having birth, and they love it. And they can do things that are really, really amazing. And a lot of the dolphins the babies that are being born out of there, at least what's going on in Russia, are becoming really extraordinary children. So far, from everything I have read, out of all these babies that have born underwater birthing, there's not one of them with an IQ under 150. And they all have extremely stable emotional bodies, extremely strong physical bodies. They seem to be a superior race in one way or another. And the births that came out of France, there were over 20,000 births that came out of France also that were, and I read all the works of these guys, and one of the things they found is that they had these big tanks that they gave birth in. And when they first started doing it, they had all the instruments all laid out on tables and everything like that, with a doctor standing by in case there was a problem. And they didn't have a problem, and they didn't have a problem, and a year went by and they didn't have a problem, another year went by, and finally 20,000 births went by without one single complication. Not even one. By now they just got the thing stuck under a thing under there. They said they just put them up, put them away. He said, because there just isn't any problems. For some reason, when a woman is floating in water, it seems like most of the complications just solve themselves. I don't know if they know why or not, but they do. And I got to spend some time with a woman who was an assistant with Tchaikovsky in Russia, and she brought back a whole bunch of the films you've probably never seen, because they were directly films out there, and I got to sit there and watch all this stuff. And I watched 2 movies of 2 different women giving birth who not only were not in pain, not only were they neutral, they were having an orgasm. They were absolutely having an orgasm having this baby. It was total pleasure. And which I know that's the way it's supposed to be. I mean, it only makes sense. I know it's supposed to be that way, and they were proving it. So I have a great deal of respect. I don't know how we got into this thing, but I have a great deal of respect for underwater birthing, and the possibility of having dolphins there at the same time is truly remarkable. I know that in Russia I've also seen the movies of this. They have babies that sleep on the bottom of swimming pools. They literally sleep on the bottom of the pool, underwater. And about every, I think it's 18 minutes, they come up while they're asleep, roll, take a breath, go back down and go to sleep again. And they can sleep. It's either 15 or 18 minutes. It's at least 15 minutes that they can stay on the bottom of the pool. Dolphins can stay 20-something minutes, I think it is, between breaths. Each one. No, these babies were not just babies. They were like 2-3 years old. They were older. They just live in water. That's their home. They just live in water. And they're being given a name. What is it? It's like a different species almost. The people are calling them Homo dolphinus or something. It's like they're a blend between them. Between the two, I mean, they're just so incredible in water. It's just becoming their medium. And they're extremely intelligent. I think it's a very good trend, a very healthy trend that's happening. Though in the United States there's a lot of pressures against it. They've finally released some of it. I think you can do this now in Florida and California legally, I believe. Though around the world, in New Zealand and Australia and places like this, there's lots of centers and much of it going off in Europe and everywhere else. It's getting stronger and stronger. The more women see other women not in pain,